Hey, what's up? How's it going, Lizzie? What's the word? Yeah, you absolutely are. You absolutely are first. How's it going? How we all doing? Sorry, I haven't been here in a bit. It's been a couple of days. I am an evil, cruel fuck in that way. But how's it going? Luckily, luckily I've grown out some facial hair, some light stubble to, make clear the passage of time. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen though. Doing all the good stuff. Let's try to get this to, I don't know, like 10,000 likes. Just keep on double tapping on that screen. Um, maybe I'll yap for a bit because I have yap time. Um, so the argument that I'm like working to oh, it's my mic is peaking. That can't be. I hope not. Hmm. Um. One sec. Yeah. How could they do this to me? Um. How the heck does one? Sorry. How the heck does one? I just want to. I'm trying to find the version. I can turn my mic down a little bit. Does that work? Does that make anything better? Is that like slightly better? Lower the gain? The gain's not very high. Damn. How about this? Is this better? Does this change anything? Okay. All right. I hope it's not peaking, but we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Let me go ahead. Oop. Let me go ahead and talk about the thing that I want to talk about. Okay, so cosmological arguments. What are they? And what do I have to say about them? Um, so a cosmological argument is trying to reason towards. Okay. The datum is something in the natural world, and then the conclusion. I'll add to that with a specific characteristic. Let's call it n to denote natural. Um, there is something that lacks n. We'll call that d for divine. So a cosmological argument is trying to reason from n to all things that have the natural characteristic needing to be in like a specific relation. Maybe they're caused, maybe they're explained, maybe they're grounded, but there's like some sort of relation present here. And that it can't go on infinitely. So it needs to be ultimately explained by something that lacks that characteristic. Um, so here's the point that I'm making. Um, so God's nature has D, the D characteristic. Now there's like further connections it goes from God's nature to God's intentions, and then it goes from God's intentions to God's action, and then it goes from God's action to creation. And then, of course, creation has n. So the key question, the objection that I'm trying to press is, how do you get something with property n from something with property d? This is pretty abstract. So let's do like a specific example. So let d be necessity. Let n be contingency. So the question for like the contingency argument, you're trying to reason from things that are contingent, which means that, you know, something that could have been otherwise something that could not have been otherwise. So, okay. So God's nature as necessity, and then creation as contingency. Now, the key question that I'm looking to press in my objection is for whatever you select for D and N, there's these like 3 transitory steps. And at some point in these 3 steps, you need to inject contingency. You need to start off with something that's something that is necessary, and then arrive at something that's contingent. So maybe you want to go from God's necessary nature, but that gives rise to contingent intentions. Or maybe you want to go through necessary intentions to contingent actions. Or maybe you want to go from contingent actions necessary actions to a contingent creation. I think these two, adding it here is like deeply implausible. I think the theist probably needs to add it here. But then there are like tons of objections to that. So I don't know. There are reasons not to. I don't know if this makes any sense. Maybe this is all yap. Maybe none of that made any sense. I don't know. Let me know. Okay, but anyway, we have people who want to talk. So if you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. I also ask that you have some sort of reason to think that God exists. And with that, we will go to the very next guest.
Off the game, go to the bathroom, and take a shit.
Okay. Let's get the very first guest. Let's see. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. What about you?
Doing well. How old are you?
20.
Yep. What religion?
I'm a neoclassical theist. I'm a Salafi Muslim.
Sure. What makes you think that God exists?
Okay, I have an argument in favor of God.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, premise 1, if I have any vertical perception or any perception that God exists, I'm justified in believing God exists.
Are you saying veridical?
And this is given like a phenomenal conservatist, like epistemology. But yeah,
Are you
anyways,
saying, is the word that you're saying veridical?
vertical, like vertical up and down.
Like up and down.
Yeah.
Could you cash out what you mean by vertical knowledge?
I would just say like any sort of epistemic access.
If you have epistemic access to God?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying like if you stand in like a direct epistemic pathway to God, then you're justified in believing that he exists?
I'm not sure what you mean by like direct epistemic, but I'll just say like...
Just like the fact that God exists explains like something about your experience. Like, and by explains, I mean like if you were to trace like the chain of metaphysical explanation, like causation, grounding, something of that sort, that you would eventually arrive at the fact that God exists.
I don't think like it's based on reasoning. Like it could just be any kind of like qualia that is related to God, I guess.
I'm not sure what that means.
I'll just say like, yeah, because I'm saying any epistemic access as in like any any understanding or any feeling or any perception or any sense or anything of that sort
One
to
sec. Let me type this out. So we got your first premise, which is if you have any vertical, what is it? If you have any vertical perception of
that God
God,
exists,
that God exists,
or of God, yeah, either way. And then, yeah, you'd be justified in believing God exists.
okay. And then just to get clear on definitions, when you say vertical perception, your definition of that is what?
Oh yeah, it's just like any kind of epistemic access or any kind of sense, or like any type of, you know, feeling, anything that just inclines you to believe in God, or like any relation to God.
So this kind of spans like a lot of categories. So there's like some where this is just trivially true, where if you stand in some sort of relation to God and you know that you stand in this relation through like some sort of like sense perception, then like pretty trivially at that point you would be justified in believing it. But then I'm not sure that I'd say that you're justified in believing in God just based on the fact that you have like a sense that he's real. That doesn't seem to follow. It's like, for
And I can
example, if
grant you
somebody,
that, but I'm saying like under some like phenomenal conservativist view, which would just be like for example, like if you see something like a tree in front of you, like you're justified in believing that tree is obviously there. But for example, if there's a stick in the water and it's like slightly
Yeah.
off, obviously due to the reflection, like even though it looks like it's in that place, like you wouldn't be justified due to like some sort of like obvious counter evidence.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying something like if it seems that God exists and there isn't like a defeater present, then you're justified in believing that God exists.
Yeah, just like, but not unqualified. And also, I'd say that God is the type of thing that can be perceived with like feelings and so on.
So
I could use that as evidence too.
there just seems to be like the pretty straightforward like parity argument here that you could say, you know, if it seems to you that God doesn't exist and there are no defeaters, then you'd be justified in believing that.
Yeah, but then I would just make like an inductive argument saying that like more people believe in God than deny God, and like as rational agents, like who have certain epistemic virtues, like, and I'd say that like obviously, I mean, you could probably like posit something like theists are less intelligent or something to that extent, but I'd just say like theists and atheists, like the average of them, would be around like the same level of intelligence, and I'd say there's a lot of like theists and atheists who have like epistemic virtues, but just in virtue of there being less atheists, I don't know how much less, but I would say like there's way less.
Sure.
Would be justified.
That's true. Like I
Given, like,
grant
this
that there
argument.
are way less. Although this just seems to be like a roundabout way to make like an appeal to authority, or an appeal to
Appeal to
majority
populace.
rather.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but like I think in this given argument, like it's not exactly fallacious. For example, if you're looking for like sense data, and there's like an experiment, what people like eating, then we obviously like appeal to the populace.
So I don't know. How do you think that there's like a potential like debunking argument? Like, okay, if we came
this
about
argument? Yeah, probably.
like a debunking argument in terms of like our intuitions about like fundamental metaphysical reality.
Wait, I don't think I'm getting what you're saying.
So are you familiar with like the evolutionary debunking argument?
No, I've never heard that.
So the evolutionary debunking argument basically argues that our intuitions about a specific topic, maybe you want to say like our moral intuitions, because our moral intuitions evolved in such a way where we intuit what we find to be like good for survival and reproduction, or like whatever is good for survival and reproduction is what we end up intuiting. It seems like there would be a pretty solid debunking argument for our intuitions about fundamental metaphysical reality, that this would be an unjustified belief because your intuitions don't stand in like the right kind
Yeah, but I was
of
saying in like certain
causal
cases,
structure.
like this guy says intuitionism, like maybe in like for example, like a moral intuitionist, they would just say like morality is a type of thing that like intuitionism could justify morality or like objective morality. But I would just say that like that could be the case. But wait, can you justify that? Like obviously, like what you said is the case. Could be the case. Like I could grant that, but thing is just like in the case of this argument, do you think that like believing in God is some sort of evolutionary mechanism?
No, but what I think is that we don't have good. I don't think that our intuitions about fundamental metaphysical reality are going to be very accurate. I think that our intuitions about metaphysics are going to be very derivative, mostly from the sort of experiences that we have. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that people might have intuitions that ultimate reality is personal, but that's because we're inclined to ascribe agency to phenomena that we don't understand. So, for example, for our ancestors, if there's like a rustling in the bush, it could be the wind, but we evolved to intuit that that rustling is an agent. We ascribe agency to situations that allows for like a lot of false positives where we're going to intuit that there's an agent there, even though there isn't actually. And that's just good for survival to have that
I mean,
intuition.
I'd say like obviously like qualia or like how you view things like phenomena versus noumena, that would obviously be like I would actually wait, yeah, I would say like the phenomena is in a way I forgot where I was gonna go with that.
I can make the point again if you want.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I think that we have good reason to think that our intuiting of agency in like the metaphysical foundation of reality, that is to say, like the fact that some people intuit that God exists. I think that there's probably a successful evolutionary explanation for this, which means that we're probably not justified because this comes from cognitive biases as opposed to some sort of actual connection to that foundation in terms of our intuitions. So we're inclined to ascribe agency to situations where we don't know what's going on. So, for example, if there's like a thump in the middle of the night in your house, you're going to think, holy shit, there's like a person in my house. Even though there's never been a person that's broken into your house before, you're still going to intuit, holy shit, there's like a person there. We intuit agency in situations where we don't know what's going on. So the fact that people intuit that a God exists as the metaphysical foundation, I think can be explained by this exact cognitive bias. But if it's explained by a cognitive bias, then we're probably not justified in believing that intuition.
Yeah, that's why I'm giving like some sort of inductive like populist argument, because maybe like a certain person doesn't have like the correct epistemic virtues. I don't even know if you like grant the epistemic virtues.
I have no idea.
Possibly, but
I'm totally agnostic to it.
like I would just say, for example, it's kind of like the whole sense reference thing. Like obviously there's like the same thing we're talking about. For example, like if we're talking about a rock, like someone could just view in a different way. Someone who's colorblind would like see in a different way.
Mhm.
And like given certain conditions, like each one of these is correct. Like if I say if someone is colorblind and they look at this rock, then it would be a certain color and that would be correct in their qualia. Like whatever they're seeing would actually obtain. But and also like again, are you saying that like whatever we see from just like whatever we perceive just as human beings, like with our senses and so on, like is flawed in a way? Because obviously I don't think you'd commit to like it being fully flawed and that we can't like derive some sort of truth.
Yeah,
Like by means of reasoning and like senses and so on.
Yeah, I think that there's a good explanation. So it's called like the two-factor system of psychology. We seem to have like two systems of reasoning. There's like the system one, which is it works a lot with like intuitions, but then and it works extremely quickly too. It's like an automatic, like if you ask your brain to give you an answer to something, your brain will give you an answer. And it's just going to intuit something. without rational reflection, but it just arrives at these conclusions based on like all sorts of heuristics. So that's why people make lots of mistakes when you ask them to do a task quickly. It's because their cognitive biases take over, and they'll
Yeah, I
pay
see
too
what
much
you're
attention to
saying.
certain pieces of information. They'll completely disregard other pieces of information, and then they'll arrive at the wrong conclusion. But then there's like this system two mechanism where we slowly reflect on the situation in front of us and arrive at some sort of conclusion. So I think that your beliefs, it depends on the situation. If you're in a situation that is flooded with cognitive biases, I think your intuitions are probably not justified in that. But I think that you'd be justified in your beliefs if you stopped and like rationally reflected on them.
But I think like the issue is what we're perceiving, and what we're perceiving isn't like I think most theists would say like God is supernatural. Obviously, like okay, something that's natural can be explained by means of like naturalism. So I'll just ask you like, do you think it's possible for anything that's like supernatural to exist?
Um, Possible. What modal scope?
Just alethic.
Alethic? Like
Yeah.
factual?
Yeah, like it's just logically possible for something like that to exist.
So, yeah, I think it's logically possible for something like that to exist.
Yeah, I'm not saying like nomologically or something like that, like the natural.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
I'm just
the
saying like
interesting modal scope is metaphysical. And
there's
to
a
that,
metaphysical modal scope.
yeah.
And what is that?
So it would just be whether or not there's going to be some sort of conflict with the laws of metaphysics, whatever those turn
Oh
out to
yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah. Like if it's metaphysically possible. Okay, I mean if you take like a naturalist, like you take a naturalist worldview, like you think it's more virtuous.
I think that those terms are pretty hard to define. Maybe it probably depends on how you define it. I don't believe in. I can give you like a ton of categories that I don't believe in. Like I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in like demons. I don't believe in
Yeah, but
gods.
is this in virtue of like your metaphysical commitments, or is this just in virtue of like you don't
Prob-
really like find it
I don't think that
convincing or
there's
whatever?
any evidence for those things.
Yeah, but that would just be question begging because like what we're saying is that we're talking about something that's supernatural, and like both of us say that, like I say it's convincing, you say it's not, and now we have to like appeal to some sort of like metaphysical theory.
Well, what you would
If
need
you,
to appeal to is like evidence, and it's not question
yeah,
begging to
but
say
like
that
the
the
evidence
explanation
is
for
just
the
my
fact
argument.
that I don't believe in this is explained by the absence of evidence for these things. That's not question begging. It's literally just like a causal story.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I gave my evidence. The only thing I qualified for is the fact that like it's a supernatural being. So like, and obviously you're appealing to some sort of like naturalistic explanation for what you're saying. Like you're saying that something is supernatural. Like you're just assuming that obviously it's some sort of, it could be some sort of like mental condition.
Sure, but the starting place for the discussion is like, okay, based on these facts that we all agree on, that we have, evolution took place and that it's left us with all these cognitive biases that dispose us to assigning agency in lots of situations where there isn't actually agency. It seems like there's just a much better explanation for why somebody might intuit that God
Yeah, but
exists,
that's
that they're
granting
inclined to do
naturalism. That's why I'm
this.
saying,
No,
like,
it
do you think
doesn't.
naturalism is more
All it
virtuous?
does, all it takes is agreeing that people are inclined to ascribe agency even in situations where agency isn't present, which by the way is just like empirically true. You would need to be denying like a ton of
No,
evidence,
but
like scientific evidence.
if I had like some counter theory that's like counter to naturalism, and I said it has like much more theoretical virtues, then I would be justified in saying like explaining it differently. Like I could say it has some sort of like naturalistic cause too, but there's also some sort of like, cause that's like in line with God and like whatever theory I'm trying to posit in order to prove God.
Yep. So, I mean, okay, maybe like a good like question to move the discussion forward. Would you agree or disagree that humans are disposed towards assigning agency to a lot of situations, even situations where there isn't agency?
Some sort of like anthropomorphism.
Specifically, like, well, yeah, I think that that's like a good a good one, but specifically anthropomorphizing agency.
Yeah, even if I granted that, like the claim I made was like, even if I grant that, like, okay, I think a good example of this is like how theists say like a soul exists and a body exists, like some sort of physical that interacts with like the supernatural. So I could just say, yeah, there's some sort of naturalistic cause, but because like my theory has more virtues, I could say there's both like a naturalistic cause and like some sort of physical cause, which would just be like or physical, substance, which would just be the body.
Sure, but then if you're granting that, and if it's like true on your worldview that people are going to be disposed towards assigning agency even in situations where it isn't present, then it just seems like we have a good defeater to the intuition that God exists.
I mean, that's just assuming. Again, that's why I said it's like circular, because that's just assuming that like naturalism is the only like theory with virtues and like you're just appealing
That's
to it.
okay. That's pretty straightforwardly not what I'm saying. I think the argument goes through even if naturalism is false. Like, I think like ghosts could
And
exist,
another
or
thing
like
that I
demons could
stipulated,
exist, or like the soul could exist, and this argument would still like totally go through. All you need to agree to for this argument to go through is that we have a tendency to ascribe agency in situations where there isn't agency, just as like a cognitive bias. If you agree to that, and you agree that this tendency to ascribe agency could explain people's intuitions that God exists as the foundational being in reality, then we have an explanation that would be stemming from cognitive biases. Like, we would have an explanation that would have a defeater for it.
yeah, I mean, again, like I could grant that to a certain extent, but I don't think I don't think it has enough explanatory power to like explain the amount of like theistic models that have existed and like the sheer like amount of rational agents who ascribe to them. And
So
yeah, go
in
on.
terms of like explaining like the number of models that people have come up with, like this also has like a naturalistic explanation, which is just the philosophy at the time. The philosophy present at the time that predated it like shapes the metaphysics of all these religions. That's why you have like all of the Aristotle gibberish getting incorporated into Augustus like 800 years later. That's why all the soul talk was huge, massive, in ancient Greece, ancient Athens, and then it got incorporated into Christianity and Judaism at the time. I mean, like, largely, these models of God and supernatural beings just stem from the philosophical conceptions of the time.
No, but all my argument has to do, like, for example, if God came down, like, even in that case, I think, like, people would have different quality of, like, what God is, and they would still have arguments as to what God is, as long as there's some sort of, like, vector of truthfulness in the claim that God exists, and that, like, people, and, like, as in the vector of truthfulness, I just mean, like, even though there might be some variances in, like, what they believe, there's, like, some overall truth, like, underneath, like, all the variances and stuff.
But what is the underlying truth?
Just God.
Yeah, but it
There's
seems
some
like
sort of,
if all that it is like they intuit that there's a personal being at the foundation of reality, well, there's just a debunking explanation for this, that this comes about in in virtue of the fact that we have a cognitive bias that disposes us to seeing agency where there isn't. So it just seems like we have a naturalistic explanation. And I mean, if we can explain these intuitions naturalistically, naturalism is just more parsimonious. It's one fewer ontological commitment.
I mean, I could say like naturalism has certain virtues, as in like, but the issue with this, I'll explain the issue, because like, okay, you could say like naturalism has the virtue of like, okay, whenever we in the natural world, whenever we like we posit a theory with naturalism, then like naturalism usually explains like whatever we see or whatever like objective thing there is much better than other theories, and it just happens to be correct like almost every single time. I'll just say that like in the domain of like the natural world, like obviously naturalism would explain the natural world better, but in terms of like some metaphysical personal, I don't know about that. Like, I don't think I would grant that.
Okay, well, think about it like this. Naturalism requires one category, the natural things. Supernaturalism requires two categories, the natural things and the supernatural things. One is less than two. So if you go and count by types, you end up viewing it that there's like one fewer category. So it would just be more
I mean, under like a
parsimonious.
deflationist account, I guess, but like what I would say is that I would say like obviously whatever's more parsimonious, yeah, I would say that's a virtue, but if there's enough like reasons or justification to believe in something, then like and it's less parsimonious than something that's like more parsimonious, but there's like less reason to believe in it, then obviously like just depending, obviously it just depends on like the level of parsimony, I guess, and like the level of what was it? Yeah, I said like reasons or like separate justification for believing in something.
Sure.
But I'd say that like justification for believing like two. I'm not a dualist, like a substance dualist, but I do think like qualia and like perception and like consciousness is just like it just seems like prima facie different from like the physical. I would say that it's kind of self-evidently the case that they're like two different things. And that but like as in it's not just like the physical. I'm saying like the entire domain of like physical things is just different from like sense perception, like feeling, just like the perception of like feelings, not just the feelings themselves, but like the perception of those things, like consciousness and so on. I'd say it's like self-evidently.
Yeah. So I probably have like three things to say about that. In terms of like qualia and how to account for it under naturalism, I mean, like worst case scenario, maybe you posit dualism. I don't know if that would be coherent. Maybe you'd have to posit a soul. But I think that there are like super plausible physicalist views of this, like even ones that are quite weighty. Like you could be like a Russellian monist and hold that all of these atoms have some sort of like intrinsic qualitative property that is only discernible through like qualitative means. But also, I think that you just have like really good reasons to think that physicalism is true, that in fact, consciousness does reduce to brain function. And the reason for that is because, you know, if we are to take quantum mechanics seriously, then we end up with the conclusion that the world is a wave function that evolves in accordance with the Schrodinger's equation.
Yeah, but like
And
all I
the
would ask
Schrodinger's
is like, what do you
equation
mean?
determines all of the
Sorry.
causes and effects. So the event that you and I are describing, like qualitative experience back and forth that we're talking about it, this is caused by our qualitative experience, but because all the causes and the effects are physical, then that would just mean that qualia is physical and in fact is accounted for by the wave function.
I mean, like that would just depend on what you mean by reduces and physical. Because like, how does it reduce? Like, even if you take my position, I could say like in a way it does reduce.
Are you
They're
asking
like
me
two
like what
separate
is
domains, but like they're not mutually exclusive.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, what question are you asking?
But yeah, I was just saying what you meant by I think it was like reduces, and there's something else that
Yeah,
was
like we could
important.
say something like emerges from or like has some property that doesn't supervene on any of the things, like any of the parts or something of that sort.
I mean, I guess it could like emerge from because obviously, okay. So what I'd say is like the soul is obviously interacting with the world. So like whatever we perceive from the world will just emerge from like the world. Because
Mhm.
if that weren't the case, like for example, if we were like in an empty bubble where like nothing exists, then like whatever you perceive from that or your like brain activity would emerge from the brain activity of nothing happening. So the perception would be nothing. But that could still like I could still posit some kind of independent soul in that case.
So this doesn't really seem to interact with the argument. The argument is just that the physical world evolves fully in accordance with the wave function, or with the Schrodinger's equation, rather, the Schrodinger's equation acting upon the wave function. If the physical world evolves fully through the wave function getting evolved via the Schrodinger equation, then that means that there is nothing other than the Schrodinger equation that accounts for causes and effects.
the
So
Schrodinger
there
and like what
cannot
would
be
this
like this mental stuff that's separate from the physical or separate from the wave function or separate from the Schrodinger equation that has some sort of like causal role here.
I mean, that's just again like that's just because like if there's two things and one thing like they're two different substances and I don't think like the same like I don't think like one could cause the other in like the same respect as like something that's like physical would cause something else that's physical.
That just does like I understand that's your conclusion, but that doesn't really interact with the argument. I mean, you would need to reject that either, you know, the world is a wave function and the evolution of the world is determined via the Schrodinger equation, or that it follows from that fact that, you know, any sort of qualitative cause and effect is going to need to be present within the Schrodinger equation and the wave function.
No, I'm just saying this is not necessarily like
Which of those two things would you
a
disagree with?
defeater to like my metaphysics.
I mean, it is in the sense that you would need to say that, strictly speaking, the qualitative stuff is physical.
The qualitative stuff. Well, what do you mean by that? Like
The stuff that there's like something
senses
that
and
it is
stuff?
to be like, you know, the qualia.
Yeah, I mean, okay, wait, let me deal with this. No, but I did say like I guess like the connection between like the physical, like the brain and like the soul. Obviously, like the soul's perception of the physical would emerge from the physical in a way, so I don't see how this is like a defeater.
But don't you think that there are causes that come from the soul to the physical? Like, for example, maybe you want to say that when you stare at like the green thing and say, wow, I'm looking at the green thing, that this is caused by the qualitative experience that took
Yeah,
place within the soul.
that's what I
And
said.
then
'Cause,
that's
like,
caused like the
you
physical
brought up,
events
like,
of you like saying the words.
yeah,
But
like the soul does have some sort of effect. Like I would say, obviously the soul isn't just like some
And do you think that
like some detached thing.
do you think the soul is present within the wave function?
I mean, the wave function would obviously be like in the domain of the physical.
So
But like we're talking about like an
no.
interaction between something that's like physical and non-physical, unless you like deny that such a thing could occur,
So
which you could.
well, so to be clear, then you would agree that the soul is not present in the wave function, but the wave function in the Schrodinger equation evolves or accounts for the entirety of physical reality.
Yeah, but that's the point. Like physical reality, the soul is like not in the domain of the physical.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why the view that I'm putting forward that the universe is a wave function that evolves in accordance with the Schrodinger's equation undermines the position. You know,
Wait, how does
if
it
your
undermine?
soul if your soul produces effects, physical effects, and your soul is not present within the wave function or the Schrodinger equation, then that means that the wave function in the Schrodinger equation cannot account for the entirety of the physical effects.
Yeah, but that's just like causes and effects between like two physical things. But like we're talking about something that's
No, it's
not
talking about all
physical
of
and
them.
physical.
Like just like the entire state of physical reality is what it
Are you
describes.
saying like? Yeah, exactly. But like, I'm just saying like it's something between. Okay, so do you have an issue with something like non-physical? Obviously, like the Schrodinger's equation and like the wave function wouldn't be relevant to that, and then that somehow
Not
affects.
necessarily.
I mean, that could still like. Okay, so like whenever that causes something physical, then that could be accounted for with like the wave function or whatever you said. But
The soul? When the soul causes something.
no, like when okay, so I don't know like what view of like causes and if you hold to like an Aristotelian view of like you know how there's like I forgot what it was. It was like act and like potential.
No, I don't believe in act and potency. I think that the B theory of
Yeah, so
time
there-
kills it.
I mean, I low-key agree with you, but like I don't think there would be that much like the connection. Okay, so there's a connection between the soul and like the physical. And like whenever that connection enters, I'm using enter here like lightly, but like enters the physical domain, then the wave function can, interact with it or account for it.
Mhm.
Sorry, not interact.
Yeah,
account
I'm
for it.
making like a bit of a stronger claim than that. My claim is that the sum total state of physical reality is described by the wave function and its evolution with the Schrödinger equation.
Yeah, I grant that. Like whenever this cause enters a physical domain, then obviously like it'd be accounted for by like the Schrodinger's equation. Like
Okay,
it's not going to be supernatural like when it enters the physical domain.
I wonder what a good way to formalize this might be. The wave function evolving in accordance with the Schrödinger equation accounts for all of the states of physical reality, which of course would include like physical effects and the physical causes, or just like, I guess like, yeah, physical effects and the causes that produce them. The wave function, according to the Schrödinger equation, accounts for all of the states of physical reality. There are physical effects that come from mental events. Maybe here's what I want to say. From one, it follows that every cause of a physical effect is itself in the Schrödinger equation and wave function. There are physical effects that come from mental events. Therefore, mental events must be in the Schrödinger equation and wave function. Something like this. Which part of this would you reject?
Yeah, just a second premise where you say like every cause of a physical effect is itself. Wait, every cause. Oh yeah, how do you know that?
That
Like okay, no, like what I'm actually saying is like how do you know when a non-physical cause has to be like within the Schrödinger equation wave function?
Yeah, if it has a physical effect, because all of the physical effects are accounted for by the evolution of the wave function in accordance with the Schrödinger equation.
No, but okay, so you're saying like every physical effect is counted by this, but I'm saying like, and that's just in virtue of like the Schrödinger equation, like the wave function explaining every like physical effect.
Just like every
Well, like,
physical
the thing is-
state is what it explains.
Like, I'm just saying, is it like not possible for a non-physical cause to then somehow like enter the physical domain? Not
None-
enter, but like the cause something in the physical domain.
No, not if the argument is sound. No.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Not if the argument is sound. It would preclude mental or like non-physical effect or non-physical causes having physical effects. Just because all these physical effects would be entirely accounted for by the wave function, and then the wave function only works with things that are in physical states.
Yeah, I mean that's just like saying like everything. Okay, so if God, everything in reality is accounted for by like, okay, for example, like a table is accounted for by wood and so on, or like a tree, whatever. But the thing is like, if God were just to like pop something into creation, like that doesn't have any like physical. There's no like physical reason behind that or whatever.
Yeah, indeed.
But like that just doesn't happen naturally, but like it could happen, and that's the point. Like obviously, like most things are going to be explained under like some sort of naturalistic theory. But
Yeah, this would indeed be quite the problem for the view that God is doing things. Like maybe you'd be able to hold, like I don't think this argument would preclude the idea perhaps God is like the cause of the wave function of the Schrodinger equation, but God it could not be like interfering with it if the argument is sound. You would need to deny a premise, but I mean probably the premise you want to deny is premise 1 to include God, but then we just have like tons and tons of evidence for premise 1.
no, but like what I could say is, okay, so God is supernatural and he does something, some sort of act that causes something to happen in the physical world.
Do you
And
can you tell me which premise you disagree with to get clear?
yeah, again, I said like the second premise.
You would
Every
deny
cause has a
that
physical
if
effect.
the wave function and the Schrodinger equation account for all of the physical reality, including physical effects and the causes that produce them, you think that it doesn't follow from the fact that the wave function and Schrodinger equation accounts for all of the causes and effects that happen within physical reality, that
Yeah, I
every
mean, isn't this
cause would need to
argument,
be...
no, isn't the conclusion of this argument to say like something non-physical can't in any way cause or interact with something that's physical?
Indeed,
I'll
yeah.
just say that like under like, okay, so you're right that like most things that are physical obviously have like a physical, you know, reason behind it existing, but like God could just pop something into existence.
No,
And
he couldn't if the wave
even,
function and the
okay, what if
Schrodinger
it just,
equation evolved for all of the physical
yeah,
effects.
he could just act in a way, okay, act in like the non-physical domain, and it causes something to exist in the physical domain in virtue of like the Schrodinger's equation. What's the issue with that?
Just because that would be overdetermined.
Overdetermined? What do you
Yeah.
mean?
It would be, you would have two things that are sufficient for the outcome. So in this stage, you'd end up having to say that God's act of creation was superfluous, that the effect was going to happen regardless of whether or not he created.
Wait, I don't get the second part. Okay, there's like two. I mean, there can be two. Is it even a sufficient condition? Because, like, obviously, I mean, for the physical world, but for God to, like, cause something in the physical world, I mean, I don't think that'd be sufficient because, like,
What? You don't think God causing something is sufficient for it to happen? You
no,
for
that's
sure
not what
don't
I'm
want to say
saying.
that.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah, you said, like, there's two sufficient, like, reasons or conditions for something to exist.
Yeah.
I don't exactly get what you meant by that.
So, okay, we have the wave function. It's evolving in accordance with the Schrodinger equation to a specific future state. And in this future state, it's going to produce specific effects, you know, in the same way that we can
Yeah, I
model
get
like
that
other
point, but,
physical
like,
systems.
I'm talking about the two
So,
sufficient conditions.
so maybe this would be like a good analogy. Let's say I drop this pen and then it accelerates downward at 9.8 meters per second squared. But, you know, while from the moment I drop the pen, God is simultaneously willing that it falls at 9.8 meters per second squared. Well, God's willing didn't really do anything because gravity also would have done that. So
No, like
in
under
that
some
sense, you
account
have
of
like
like
two
divine
sufficient
concurrentism.
conditions.
No, because the thing is like, okay, like under an account of divine concurrentism, like there wouldn't be an issue with that because like two things can concurrently be like, I forgot exactly what the argument was, but so God is okay. I think it was like God is like the necessary condition for that to happen. Like the person dropping is like the sufficient condition, but he's still acting on it, so it'd still be him doing that thing. It's just that everything that happens, like there's this sort of like divine condition or reason behind it.
So
There's
you're
still,
saying like God like literally creates like each moment one to the next?
because he has like control over the. He doesn't create it. He just has some sort of play in it. Let's just say it
What
like that.
role does he have?
Like some sort of play, or how do I say this? Like some sort of. Yeah, he has some sort of, you know, hand in it, I guess. Like he has some sort of
Can you get a bit more specific than that? Like what's specifically the relation? Is it like a sustaining relation? Is it like a determination relation? Like what
I
is
mean,
this
I would just say
relation
that
to
like
each
everything
moment?
that happens, obviously God would have some sort of like there's not something that's gonna happen that God doesn't know about or doesn't have any power over, or just like something that happens without God willing it.
Okay, so everything that happens, it is just God willing it.
Yeah, but like you could do something. Okay, so like I'll just give you an example. If like if two people in a group will to go to like a supermarket and get eggs, but like they send one person to do it, then like both of them are willing it, but like one person's doing it.
Yeah, although it seems like the person who's not actually going and getting the eggs, that unless one person's will caused the other person's will, it seems like the first person's willing it actually has no role in like the causal story about how the eggs are gotten.
Yeah, but I could just say that like if this, I mean, what do you mean? Like, okay, they could have just discussed it earlier and then
Yeah, well,
like both of
in
them
that
just agreed
case,
that like
mhm.
there's some sort of like agreement that like one of them is gonna get an egg from the supermarket.
Yeah, in a case like that, then this both of the wills would have had some sort of impact on like the causal story, you know. When you
Yeah, they do
recount the
though.
story about how these eggs were gotten, well, actually, both of those wills were, I don't know, like necessary for this to unfold in the way that it did.
I mean, for the way it did, yeah. Like obviously, the reason I said like the person's will is kind of like sufficient is because like God like wills everything. Like I already stipulated that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like both of them for that exact state of affairs to happen, like it's necessary for both individuals to will it in a way.
So this seems to get you in like irreconcilably bad places in terms of the problem of evil. Do you think if God wills something, then it's good?
If God wills something, I'll just say like goodness is predicated to his nature.
Okay, and is God's will in line with his nature?
Yeah.
So you would say that everything that God wills is good?
Because I'd say like acting on your will, no, I mean acting on your nature is your will. But yeah, I see where you're going with this. I'll just say that like because okay, something that's evil, that could just qualify like something that's evil would be like God can never act alone on something that's evil.
But
Like if there's someone else acting on it, then obviously because God governs like the entire universe and like he's allowing it to happen in a way.
so okay, let me break this down. I'll formalize the argument and get you to reject a premise. God wills every state of affairs that occurs.
Maybe like governs is a better because like saying wills is
Isn't that
like
what you're
he
saying?
wants it exactly. Like he can be displeased with his state of affairs. So maybe like
Wills just means
governs.
that he like intends it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. God intends that occurs. Everything God
Bro, holy hate
intends
comments.
is good. I don't know, like the rape of Nanking is a state of affairs that occurred. Therefore, the rape of Nanking is good. This seems to be what you'd be committed to. Which of these premises would you reject?
Okay, God intends every state of affairs that occurs. Okay, I grant that everything God intends is good. Yeah, just like in a greater good kind of sense, because I could just appeal to like it being some sort of greater good.
So you would say that the rape of Nanking is good?
You're being genuine? How do you know I'm not trolling? Okay. No, I'm saying no, obviously it wouldn't be a good thing. But I'm just saying like for the greater just for like it's just the whole argument about like free will versus because like if you're truly free then you can do like good and evil.
But which premise here would you be rejecting?
Yeah, I'll just reject the fact that like No, I'll just say that like the second premise isn't sound.
A premise can't be sound. Soundness is a property of arguments. Soundness refers to the idea that it follows like some sort of valid inference rule, and then all
No,
the
I'm
premises
saying
are true.
yeah, I'm saying it's not justified.
Not justified.
That's what I mean by sound.
Okay, but then if you're saying that God intends bad things, well, then it seems like you'd have to say that God's will isn't like perfectly morally good.
No, I'm just saying like in virtue of like there being like a greater good, then this
Yeah.
argument wouldn't fall.
Okay, so we could say everything God and well, but if there's a greater good, wouldn't you say that it is good?
Yeah, it'd be great. No, like the act itself isn't good, but like the free will that causes the act is better than there being no free will. Yeah.
Okay,
And that leads to
sure.
greater good. And that is good.
Yeah. So you would say that it's good or that it's like for the greater good?
It is good, obviously, because like
Then you
good
agree
is
with the second one?
it entails some sort of like no, like greater goodness entails some sort of goodness.
Yeah. I'd probably agree with that. So then it seems like you'd be committed to affirming that 2 is good. Or sorry, not
Yeah,
good,
but just
true.
qualified. No, qualified. There's no issue with it.
Okay, so then you agree with premise 2. So which premise do you disagree with?
I mean, I don't agree to it unqualified and like for the third premise.
Well, so I mean, you laid out like a pretty good argument. You know, everything God intends is for the greater good. You said it was an entailment from the greater good that it is good. If something is for the greater good, then it is
Yeah, but
good.
there's no issue because it's in virtue.
Therefore,
of-
you'd end up saying that everything God intends.
No, the thing is like there's
It's
no
good.
issue because it's in virtue of like there being free will. 'Cause
So
if
you would
there
just
were no
accept the
free will-
conclusion, or
No, this is just a consequent of the antecedent that like free will. Okay, so like if if you weren't allowed to like do evils and you then like that would cause an issue to free will.
yeah,
Like
but then
it's
it's
good in virtue of that. So what's the issue with that?
But then it's not clear to me which premise you're rejecting because it just sounds like you agree with premise 2. You agree with
Yeah, I
premise.
can qualify. There's no issue. Like I could say that.
Yeah, so you accept premise 2. You accept premise 1. Is the argument not obviously valid? I can make it like more obviously valid if you'd prefer.
Yeah, it's valid, but I don't think it exactly like
Okay, so
it doesn't. It's kind of like a straw man.
LARP agrees it's valid. Do you agree the premises are true?
Wait, is this like modus ponens? Wait, one
No,
second,
it's not
what's the
modus
definition?
ponens. It would be something like, I don't know,
Some sort of entailment.
P. Okay,
Yeah, it'd be
wait.
like quantifier, everything like
There's a
universal quantifier.
Intends good intents every state of affairs. Yeah. You'd
Yeah,
want
if
to
it's not like
say
a simple modus ponens, I can like qualify all.
maybe you'd want to reword this one as like, if God intends something, then it's good.
Yeah, good qualified. I can just say qualified.
It's
There's no issue with
good,
that.
but you wouldn't say like good unqualified, or
Yeah, I'll just say good qualified.
okay, wait one sec.
So then the issue, like what
Well,
we
but then which
is like it being good qualified.
a premise
And then there I can
2.1 and
just say-
2.2, which of those would you reject then?
Wait, if God intends every single phrase, which is P. If God intends something that is this even valid? Like I don't even. They run
So-
this through like a logic table.
So it's going to follow from 1 and 2. God intends every state of affairs that occurs. If God intends something, then it's good. That every state of affairs that occurs is good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, but the difference is just between like 2 and 2.1, where one's like good. There's a greater good and then greater good.
And then
Yeah, but you didn't write unqualified because like if you say unqualified, like then the debate would be about what it means for like a
We could do
qualified
if God
unqualified.
intends something, then it's for the greater good. Would you prefer that? We could, and then the conclusion could be the
No, I
rape of
think
non-king is
qualified
for the
is
greater
better because
good.
like then the debate has to go to like the qualification.
But the
Obviously-
qualification is it's like the greater good. So if we changed it for if God intends something, then it's for the greater good. God intends every state of affairs. Did he run away? I think he ran away. That's kind of sad. Oops. Listen, bud, I don't know. Maybe it didn't go well. I don't know. This is why you have to lock in on your philosophy arc. You can really eradicate LARPers everywhere. And if you want to lock in on your philosophy arc, we're doing the reading group later today. We're reading Rosalind Hursthouse's On Virtue Ethics. You still have time to read it. It's at 8 p.m. EST tonight. So in 3 hours, it's going to be. I look forward to seeing all of you. We're reading the chapter on irresolvable dilemmas. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait to see you all there. If you're in the, hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Yep. How old are you?
I'm 23.
Yep. What religion?
Christianity.
Yeah. What makes you think that God exists?
He has a plan for you, Harry Potter. He has a plan. He has
You
a
good?
plan.
You
He has
okay?
A plan. A plan. A plan.
You having like a mental episode? Really gets better. You know, there are resources. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you think that God does exist. Specifically, you know, I ask that you be like a deist or, you know, maybe like a Christian, Muslim, Jewish person. One of those is chill. We're the very next guest. Other than that, I only have one person in the guest request box. You know, if you want to debate me on this topic, if you think God does exist, request to join so we can have that chat. I currently have nobody requesting to join other than this person. And don't request to join unless you want to debate the topic. You know, you got to be 18 or older. You must think that there's like a God that exists. As we go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going?
How are you? I just wanted to do a callback to the last thing that he had. It was under like a false pretense because it's actually God allows bad things to happen, not really intends.
Sure. Then you would just disagree with the last guest who said explicitly that he thinks God intends every state of affairs.
Right.
Yeah. So, but first of all, how old are you and what religion are you?
I'm 21 and I'm Catholic.
Okay. Is there something that makes you think that God exists?
Yes. There's multiple things. We could go with, do you believe in an objective morality?
I do, yeah. Although I don't think that it is relevant to the God topic, because I think that even if like objective morals didn't exist, I don't think that God could make it such that they do exist. I don't know. Here's how I kind of see the issue. So when we're talking about ethics, what we're interested in is finding something that everyone has a reason to do. And it's not clear to me that God commanding something could possibly give everyone a reason to do it. You know, let's say God says you shouldn't do X, Y, or Z. Like, what reason does that give me to not do X, Y, or Z? The fact that God said it.
Yes. Literally, yes.
But like, what reason would I have?
Because he is the ultimate perfection of goodness. So
That's
if he's saying that
question
something is
begging.
immoral, wait, what was that?
That's question begging. In order for him to be the ultimate perfection of goodness, I would need to have some reason to do what he tells me to, which is the very thing in question.
Well, it would be because he's the creator.
Okay.
He created you. He's like a father to you.
Okay. Why does somebody being like a father to me mean that I have a reason to do what they tell me?
Well, we would have to look at what God is. So you would have to ask yourself, is he the perfection of goodness? Is he a good creator? Is he moral? You'd have to ask yourself a bunch of different questions. So you'd have to ask you, is he the source of all knowledge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
So this seems to put the cart before the horse, which is just that things are good in virtue of the fact that everyone has reason to do them. You don't have a reason to do it because it's good. It's good because you have a reason to do it. So just saying like the reason that you have to listen to God is because he's good, it just gets the grounding in the wrong order. Like in order for God to be good, there would need to be some reason for me to be like him. If there's no reason for me to be like him, then God isn't good.
Well, you could look at the Bible.
Okay. The Bible is full of like horrific things, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, like the life of Jesus. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, of course, there's like bad things that happen in the Bible. Of course, like no one's going to debate that. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
But-
if we look at the life of Jesus, it's full of love.
mhm.
He doesn't sin.
You're saying that I agree there's going to be like good stories that you could find in the Bible that I would agree are like good things, but your claim is that God is the perfection of goodness, that presumably every
Yeah.
single thing that God does is perfect. But I mean, God commands the genocide of the Amalekites. He says, go slaughter the men, the women, the children, and the infants. Do you think
Yeah,
that's
so
in
that
line
would
with
be-
God's loving nature, is like good nature?
Yes, because that would be under a fallen world in the Old Testament where the world acted in a different place. So, for example, if you're like your mom doesn't spank you anymore when you
Mhm.
misbehave, right?
Yeah.
Similar to like how we have evolved as people and grown up, similar to have you grown up into an adult, your mom isn't going to spank you anymore. So God isn't going to call us to go and slaughter people anymore.
Yeah, sure. But would God still have been morally perfect if he didn't command us to go and slaughter those people?
Yes. It
Why is that morally
really
perfect?
because it was the way that he decided to choose to run the world. If that's the punishment that he's going to decide for them, I don't remember exactly all the history of what they were doing at the time, but if that was what was like needed to be done, I'm sure there was a reason.
Do you
I would
think-
need to like go and look at the history and like really understand like the book.
I'm happy to summarize it to you. Let me pull up the verse. So this is 1 Samuel 15, 2-3. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish the Amalekites for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So what crime did they commit to deserve this? Well, it tells you in the verse, for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. What happened is 400 years prior, the Amalekites attacked the Israelites. They attacked their great grandparents. So God waits 400 years to kill the great grandchildren who had nothing to do with it. Don't you think the people
Oh, well,
receiving the
then-
punishment should be the people guilty of the crime?
Well, then you would have to look and see why is he choosing to do this. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. Are they going to wage war against Israel again?
That's not the reason that he's
So-
citing for punishing them. He's saying because of this thing that happened in the past.
I mean, that's fair enough, but I mean, if that's the choice that he wanted to make, I haven't personally read it. I'd have to go through and like really read it to make a consistent argument on that.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm not going to argue something I don't really know about.
That's fine. But I mean, absent like a response, it seems like what we're left with is the view that actually it's morally perfect to punish people who didn't commit the crime.
Well, I don't know what the verse is, so I don't know if you're like framing it falsely or not. I really don't know. I don't know the reason why he's choosing to do that.
Okay. I mean, I explained those things to you, but okay.
I know, but then that would make me like just take your word for it. So
What would
I would actually have to go and like research it and be like, okay, why is he choosing to do this?
Well, okay. I know that this is like, how about we just read through all the relevant verses? Amalekites attack the Israelites. We'll read the Exodus first. So this is Exodus 17, 8-16. Amalek attacks Israel and is defeated. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some men for us and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held his hand up, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on either side, so his hands were steady until the sun set, and Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a remembrance in a book and recite it in the hearing of Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "A hand upon the banner of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." And then jump 400 years later to Samuel, from Exodus to Samuel. "Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish the Amalekites for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." So Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 soldiers of Judah. Saul came to the city of the Amalekites and lay in wait in the valley. Saul said to the Canaanites, "Go, leave, withdraw from among the Amalekites, or I will destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came out of Egypt." So the Canaanites withdrew from the Amalekites. Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt. He took King Agag of the Amalekites alive, but utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. So,
Okay, so I just looked at like the context of it. It says that they were posing an existential threat to the Israelites, and it started 400 years earlier. So, to my understanding, it was still ongoing.
can I get like a single verse that says that the Amalekites were attacking the Israelites, other than the one in Exodus?
I can look for one.
Yeah.
Let's see. There is the ones that like just popped up when I type it in is I haven't really read them yet, but this is the ones that pop up. Numbers 14:45.
Numbers 14:45.
I haven't even really read it. I'm just reading what pops up when I look that up.
Lived in that hill country, came down and attacked them. Sure, but this is still going to be in the time of Moses.
You have Judges 3:13.
Judges
6:3.
3:13. Preferably, I'd like something that's like within the generation. It's Amalekites. He went and defeated Israelites, and they took possession of the city of palms. Sure.
You have Summon Samuel that popped up.
Like where?
The one that you mentioned, 1 Samuel 15, was the one where God casted his judgment.
Yeah.
You have
But
1 Samuel 31 through 20.
30. Yeah, sure. But then 1 Samuel 30 is going to be after this one.
Yeah, I know.
I think what I'm really looking for is like something that's roughly from like the same time period where the Amalekites attack them, that isn't like hundreds of years later.
I mean, some of them say that they were killed to prevent future atrocities. So, like I was saying, you don't know what they were going to do in the future.
That seems to be.
I believe that God is all knowing. He's omnipotent. So I think that he will be able to protect his people. And
would you agree that if somebody hasn't committed a crime yet, then they're innocent?
I would say so.
Yeah, but then you also think that it's okay to give a punishment to an innocent person on the basis of a thing that they will do in the future but haven't done yet and aren't even planning to do?
We also have to understand that these were God's people in the Old Testament. He was protecting them in order to continue their history. I mean, those were the Judeans or the Israelites were his chosen people.
But it's like a war of aggression. Surely God can protect them in other ways. You know, he could have teleported the Amalekites to a different continent.
He could, but wouldn't that be working outside of his nature?
Why?
Has he ever done that? I mean, he won't really do things that break the natural laws of the universe.
Except all the times that he does, right? Like he did the flood, he kills the firstborn sons with like the angel of
We have
death, you know,
floods all
he
the time. Have you seen
resurrected.
Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah, but do you think God caused Hurricane Katrina?
I think he allowed Hurricane Katrina. Yeah.
But did he? I didn't ask if he allowed it. I asked if he caused it.
I wouldn't say he like caused it, but he
Yeah.
can cause it.
Yeah, but he.
I mean,
you
once
know,
again,
he
it's like
causes
Old
the
Testament. It's a
flood.
different world.
So he violates the rules like kind of consistently. You know, you also think that he raised Jesus from the dead.
Well, I believe that Jesus was God.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's fine, but that is just
I
like
do
a
have a
violation of the
question for
natural
you.
world.
So, on your objective morality,
Are we
like you think
pivoting
murder's
toward-
wrong, right?
Fine. I think that you have strong prima facie reasons to not murder. So yeah, in that sense.
So why would it matter? Let's say like if why would it be immoral if hypothetically I don't know what TikTok words you want to use, but like
Yeah, you can say murder. I don't
took your
care.
life. Okay, so if I murdered you, what makes that like objectively immoral?
Yeah, the fact that there's a contradiction in your worldview. When you attempt to establish your ethics or say what you have a right to do or to not do, you end up with a contradiction, which means that your ethical system can't be consistent, which means that it's false. So then the true one must be one that's not contradictory. So here's the contradiction. In order to murder someone, you're going to need to say that you have a right to life, because in order to carry out the murder, you would need to be alive. If you're not alive, you can't carry out the murder. But meanwhile, you're denying that right to other agents. So you'd both need to say that your agency is sufficient for you to have a right to life, because that's what it takes to achieve your goals. But then, you know, other agents don't have a right to life. So agency is both sufficient but insufficient for the right to life, which is a contradiction.
Well, I think you're kind of just dodging the question. I'm just asking, why would it be immoral for me to murder someone?
Yeah, because the ethical
In your
system that would
worldview.
allow for that is contradictory. So the
That's
true
not
ethical
a morality
system.
question. That's more of like a logic question.
Well, don't you think that the true morality is going to be non-contradictory?
I suppose so, but
Yeah.
why would it actually matter?
Yeah, because
like,
then that's
like
the
if,
false morality. That would be a false ethical system. So the true ethical system must be one that regards murder as wrong.
But why would it matter? If I didn't care, even if I don't think I have a right to life, I don't think anyone has a right to life.
Oh,
Why
but
does
you
it
need
matter
to.
if I murder someone?
In order to murder people, you would need to claim a right to life. Otherwise, you couldn't do the murder.
Why would you have to claim a right to life?
Yeah, because if somebody killed you, you couldn't achieve your goal, which means that, so if something's necessary to achieve your goal, you have a reason to have it, which is to say that you'd be committed to saying that you ought to have it. So the murderer would be committed to saying that they ought remain alive, which means that you ought not interfere with that, which means that they're saying that they have a right to life and that you ought not interfere with that right to life. So that's why they would need to claim that.
I feel like you're really just dodging the question there.
I think that the answer was like extremely firm and direct.
All right, bro.
Okay, like do
I think-
you really disagree with that? Like you don't think, so you'd agree that in order to successfully complete the murder, like something necessary for that is that you're going to need to be alive, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you have to like claim that you have a right to life.
Okay, so would you agree that if something is necessary to achieve your goals, then you have a reason to do that thing?
Could you re-say that one more time?
Yeah, if something's necessary to achieve your goals, then you have a reason to do that thing. So for example,
Sure.
let's say your goal is to graduate college, and necessary to graduate college is going to your classes. We would say that you have a reason to go to your
sure.
classes. So
Yeah.
all we're saying when we say that you ought do something or ought have something is that you have a reason to do that or have that. So because being alive is necessary to murder someone, the murderer is committed to saying that they ought stay alive in order to go through and carry out the murder. But if they ought stay alive, then others ought not interfere with them being alive. And if others ought not interfere with something, that just is a negative right. So this murderer must say that they have a negative right to life in order to actually carry out a murder.
Wait, that's an interesting take. I've never heard that one before.
Yep, so that's why it would be wrong. It would lead to a contradiction.
Huh. I'm actually gonna like look into that one. That's an interesting one.
If you
I've
want-
never heard that before.
If you want a good resource on this, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy has an article. The guy who this argument comes from, his name's Alan Goworth.
It's Gorth, G-O-R-T-H.
Gewirth.
Okay. What was it? It was an American.
Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Okay, that's a very interesting argument.
Yep.
I've never heard that one, but basically my argument would have gone like, if we aren't created with like an intelligent, or if we aren't created by an intelligent creator, and we're all just like blobs, why does really anything truly matter in the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like,
Because in the end, there's nothing. So like, it really just nothing would matter. It kind of just turn into like a nihilistic. Like that's why I say like, that's why I ask like, if you have an objective morality, why would it matter if you kill somebody? Because in the end, nothing actually matters if it's just like nothing, or it's a void or blackness or sleep, whatever, however you want to define it.
yeah, I think that, maybe that argument, well, I don't know. I don't think the moral argument is very good because I think like either the atheist is obviously going to reject one or the other. Either the atheist believes in objective morals, in which case they're going to reject that you can't have objective morals without God, or the atheist doesn't believe in objective morals, in which case they're obviously going to reject that there are objective morals. So I don't know. In terms of like the philosophical literature, the moral argument is not very popular because the atheist just has like very easy answers, and there's not a good way to move the dialectic forward.
What do you think about Aquinas's 5 ways?
I think that they're like slightly better, but like probably really bad. So take the argument from change. The argument from change tries to reason from it tries to reason from the existence of change in the world to some sort of like unchanged changer whose being we're like deriving change from. But if God is unchanging, then the world must be unchanging, because God can't change from sustaining one moment to the next moment. He must just be eternally sustaining all of the moments in a way that's unchanging. But then,
well, he's outside of time, right? So
yeah, that's like
is
the
that
problem.
like what do you mean by that? Because if he's outside of time, then how does that hold up?
Yeah, because kind of in the exact same way, right? God can't go from sustaining one time to sustaining the next time. He needs to be eternally sustaining all of the times. Otherwise, he would be changing from sustaining one moment to sustaining the next moment.
Why wouldn't he be able to do that?
Because if he does that, then that just means that all the moments are eternal. So you end up with a view of time called eternalism, which denies the existence of change. Aquinas' first way, the argument from change, undermines itself. It needs change in order to make the argument. But if you end up with like this unchanging being, well, an unchanging being can only give rise to an unchanging reality, like an eternalist reality, which means that there actually isn't any change.
What about the argument from degree? How would you really answer that one? Because that one's like, that's what I meant by like God is the maximum of perfection or morals, because you have to have a maximum in order to like, or everything's judged to a maximum perfect standard.
I think can you lay out the argument one more time?
So basically what I've written down is we observe things of different degrees of quality. Things are more or less good, true, beautiful, etc. These qualities are judged to a maximum or perfect standard. There must be a perfect source of all perfection, something that is perfect in every way. God is that maximum.
I think that there are like plausible, like naturalistic things that you might want to say to this. Maybe you want to say that the standard that you judge things by is something like virtue, or something like I don't know, maybe there's like an ultimate end that exists, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with like eudaimonia. It's like the Greek concept of like a good life. But the Greeks
Yeah,
argued
yeah.
for virtue ethics by arguing that one of everybody's goals is, or maybe ought to be, eudaimonia, and then from that, like what's necessary for that is virtue, and then maybe you just want to say that the things that are like more good are going to be the things that are like more virtuous. So it just seems like this doesn't get you outside of nature. Like this doesn't get you to like a being of that sort. Also, I think beauty, I think morals are objective, but beauty strikes me as the sort of thing that's like definitely subjective. Although I haven't read the literature, so I
Really?
could be wrong about that.
You don't think like when you go outside the world's beautiful? I think that's what's mainly getting at. Less on like personal beauty,
I think some of the
more on
world
like
is beautiful.
yeah.
But
I mean, obviously, if
interestingly-
like a place gets bombed to hell, it's not gonna like look nice. I mean, obviously, but that's because of like a human condition.
Yeah, I think that different people are going to find different parts of the world to be beautiful in different ways. It just doesn't seem so. What it would mean for something to be objective, what it would mean for beauty to be objective, is that if people disagree about what's beautiful, there's going to be like some explanation for like who's right and who's wrong. It's just
Mhm.
not clear to me that there is one. Like it's
Yeah,
not
I
clear to
can't
me that
remember-
there's like a common basis to appeal to
I
determine
can't
like,
remember
who's right and
exactly
wrong
what it
about this.
meant by beauty, but I do remember when I researched it, it was a good explanation because I remember I thought the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
It was something that was like you can't really like. It was like an objective beauty. It wasn't like
I know that some
It wa-
people like try to characterize like the standard as something like, you know, something that's like the right mix of like form and proportion, and they'd go and like list a bunch of traits. But I don't know, it's not super clear to me that
Well, I would
somebody would
say-
be
well-
objectively wrong if they disagreed with that or thought something was
Well,
beautiful.
the argument is like God would be the maximum perfection of beauty, and that's how we have different gradations of beauty.
Mhm.
So that's why we have things that are like uglier, and like some things that are like more beautiful.
Yeah. No, I understand what the way that God would fit in a circumstance like that. Like I understand that were God to exist, that he ostensibly could be like the standard for beauty, but it just doesn't strike me as true that there is like an objective beautiful and not beautiful, as opposed to something that we, I don't know, like think is beautiful or perceive as beautiful, but it's not clear that there's like some underlying reality there.
Okay, that's an interesting one. But I would say everybody has a perception of beauty.
Mhm.
So then that maximum would have to be God, no matter like what you are.
But what if different people find different things to
'Cause
be
we
beautiful?
all- Yeah, but there has to be a maximum perfection in order to like understand beauty.
Sure, but why couldn't that be like strictly subjective to the person?
Well, then what would it be if it's like subjective?
Probably some report of finding it like tasteful, something like that.
Like what? What do you mean?
We find certain things pleasing, we find certain things displeasing. Beauty seems to map on roughly to that. But different people find different things like pleasing or displeasing.
Okay. There was. What do you think about tag?
I think tag is arguably the worst argument. I think tag
Really?
is like really bad. Yeah, there's like trivial responses to it. Like you could, I don't know. I think you could be like just a straight up like physicalist or materialist and respond to tag. I think that like you could say, for example, there's a position in philosophy of physics or philosophy of science called ontic structural realism that holds that there's like certain like structural relations between these various like quantities, and that the laws of logic are just going to map onto the structure.
Interesting. So, like, how would you refute? Let's see. I know I have it written down. Just like scrolling through. I'm just gonna read like one part of it.
Yeah, go
It is
for it.
illogical for objective morality to rely on evolution, social convention, or preference.
Hmm?
These foundations would reduce objective morality to relativism or a might makes right. Relativism reduces objective morality to subjectivism,
Yep.
and objective morality cannot work under a might makes right
Yep.
because it would assume that strength ought to define what is objectively moral. The only adequate foundation is the triune God who grounds objective morality within his holy nature, which is defined as perfect and eternal love that exists within the relationship of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
I mean, first of all, I don't know why, I don't know how we're possibly getting the Trinity out of this, but other than that, like I agree with that. Other than like the God stuff, obviously, my moral epistemology, the way that I think we arrive at moral knowledge, like figuring out what's right and what's wrong, is through laws of logic. I think that there are certain commitments that you make by taking actions, like if you're taking a logical, intentional action, you need to say that there's like a reason for why you're doing what you're doing. And then from that, you're going to end up committed to saying that everyone has a right to freedom and well-being based on kind of the argument I gave you earlier. So it seems like we could arrive at the correct moral facts just on the basis of logic.
Mm-hmm. How would you argue what they say about the laws of logic? So it says like laws of logic are universal, immaterial, and invariant in their very nature. They are all propositions that serve as primary bearers of truth. They're not simply linguistic or physical. You can state a law of logic in numerous languages. They're still the same law of logic that exists independently of language or brain chemistry.
Mm.
The issue here is that materialism will reduce them to brain chemistry, and atheism is unable to justify its application to reality without circularity or arbitrariness. The only way to ground these propositions is through a God that precedes these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the conclusion kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't know, you could be a logical realist and hold that reality has like a specific structure to it and that the laws of logic are just abstractions of that structure. So the way that you would account for the immaterial nature of it is that it's like an abstraction. The way that you would account for the universality of it is that it's like the structure that underlies reality. So, it's like the relations, the relational structure between all of the things in reality. There are like very easy, very trivial answers to this that in no way, shape, or form require God. But you could probably take it a step further and argue that indeed possibilities require the underlying structure that I'm describing, which means that God wouldn't be an ultimate being, because God's mental states that are about something, in order for God's mental states to be about something, in order for God to will specific things or know specific things, that this would require him to exist within the structure that I'm describing. And if God exists within the structure that I'm describing, that means that you're not going to be able to reduce logic to him in your worldview. And in fact, God is a dependent being.
Okay. Oh, I remember. So I watch your streams every now and again. I remember I saw one argument that you made that I had to sit for like 15 minutes to come up with like an answer to it, and it was someone was arguing about God's omnipotence, and you argued like, can God make a rock that is so big he can't lift it?
I don't typically run that argument unless people say that they think that God is outside of logic. So if you think God can only do things that are logical, then there probably isn't a problem.
Okay. Okay. So like you wouldn't actually hold that argument, I guess.
No, I don't think that I think that they're like theist responses to that. I don't think that moves the dialectic forward in like a meaningful way.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you. I don't really have anything else.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on up here. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Damn, I hope that, gosh, the more I read, the more knowledgeable I get about philosophy. I feel like I'm definitely, one thing that I worry about, I worry that I'm like shooting way above people's heads. I don't know. Let me know. Let me know if it's not making sense. Maybe I just have to get into the habit of like explaining things like very consistently. Yes, Alexander, it is live. All right, make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, and all that good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. Let's read some supers. Garbage Man, thanks so much for the super chat. All people know God, or P1, all people know God. P2, some people are non-believers. Conclusion, Phil Bros can't define knowledge as a subset of belief. True. That's a banger. That's a banger ass argument. That's like kind of brutal. I think that argument like actually works. I don't even know what they would say to get out of that. I mean, of course, like they would need to say like the crazy thing, which is that all people know that God exists, which is just obviously false. But if they're committed themselves to saying that all people know God, they would need to say, if they think knowledge is a type of belief, which it like has to be, then yeah, the conclusion just follows. Okay, wait, the argument again. P1, all people know God. P2, some people don't believe in God. Therefore, knowledge is not a type of belief. Because if knowledge was a type of belief and everyone knew that God existed, well, there couldn't be non-believers. Grimfellow, thanks so much for the super chat. Has God ever explained anything without just kicking the can down the road? This is the sort of argument that I'm coming around to. It's called they're called like stalking horse arguments, which is just that there are going to be forms of naturalism that are able to explain the phenomena with like a much lighter commitment load. You know, you can explain consciousness just by appealing to something like a Russellian monism, which holds that, you know, at the foundation of reality, intrinsic to the particles is some sort of like qualitative stuff. Or like a panpsychism even, although I think that gets kind of wacky. Andrew, thanks so much for the $100 Venmo. That's big. I saw that the other day. Let's get a big W. Crazy week for me. I'm getting caught up on this week's stream. Have a great weekend. I really appreciate that, Andrew. You know, my knowledge of philosophy is deepening. And one of the things that, you know, explains that is that I'm taking some like philosophy courses through a community college, and I'm making connections too. You know, for example, I don't know, I was I made some connections through my professor, and I might this upcoming fall semester I might be auditing like a grad seminar for philosophy, an epistemology graduate seminar, which would be really cool. I don't know, my knowledge would definitely deepen, but I couldn't do this without the huge super chats like that. You know, I simply would not have the resources to do that. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Team ET, thanks so much for the super chat. I'd love to see you pull out the free will refutation you used on JP more often. I've been using it all day and got some theists to concede. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I'm thinking through right now, which is that it seems like the only way out of it is to say that God's knowledge of your actions depends on your actions, but then God's not an independent being. There are features of God that depend on you. But then God's knowledge of his own actions must be explained by the actions themselves. But if and God's action explains the fact that you exist, I think there's a way to sharpen this problem. One sec, let me think through this. Okay, I'll try not to gibberate too much. Okay, if we go through the explanatory chain, so God's act of freely selecting this timeline causally explains your existence, but also your actions, because he knows what they're going to be beforehand. Sorry, this is probably something I'll have to figure out on my own time. I think there's probably a way to formalize that in like a very sharp way. All right, let's go to the very next guest. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure, hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? I'm good.
Doing well. How old are you?
I am 27.
Yep. What religion?
I am a Christian.
Yeah. What makes you think that God exists?
Well, I get my feeling, if you want to put that in like analytical terms, I like the argument from causality. I also like
Do you want to?
the argument from
I was just going to ask, do you want to lay out the argument from causality?
uh if I could kind of finish like the why I think in total.
Hmm.
Because we could go down that road, but I would like to go back to something you said earlier, but just to kind of like state some of my positions first would probably be good.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I'm much more of a phenomenologist in my thinking, and so I'm gonna get like a lot more of my idea of God from that kind of stuff, more from the like analytical side of the traditions. Uh, so more so like looking at um intentionality in nature. But earlier you tied in the problem of evil to like physics and causality when you were talking about Schrodinger's equation. I thought that was really interesting. I think it was two guests ago.
So there's like a whole bunch to untangle here. I guess I'll go in order. Um, when you're talking about like the intentionality that's present in nature, that wouldn't really have anything to do with phenomenology. Phenomenology is like a field of philosophy and continental philosophy that tries to reason about the nature of like experience and like the nature of mind, and try to infer different things about like metaphysical reality on the basis of like your individual experiences as themselves, not like an experience of the external world, but just like the experience itself is what you try to reason from. So that doesn't, maybe I'm like missing it, but that would seem to have nothing to do with intentionality in nature. But then the other thing that you said about using like the Schrodinger equation and the wave function to describe the problem of evil, these were like two separate discussions. The wave function and the Schrodinger equation were being invoked to argue that consciousness must reduce to the brain. Like at least like the mental states that cause things must reduce to the brain because they're accounted for via the wave function evolving by the Schrodinger equation. The problem of evil fell out of like a separate thing that the person said.
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting how you kind of caught him and said that because of what he was counter arguing, he would run into the problem of evil.
Mhm. Yep.
I just liked where that was going.
Yeah, sure. But okay, which of these things do you want to talk about?
Well, first, I mean, like from phenomenology, like observing my own intentionality. Consciousness is like at least sometimes directed towards something. So
I agree.
experiencing an object or experiencing a state of affairs, it's sort of intuitively, um, like in my own mental calculus, is it more or less likely that this emerges spontaneously from an initial cause that has a personality or does not have a personality? Like, what are you going to think is more likely? If that question is posed to me, I think more likely that it reflects conscious intentionality behind the universe.
So here's the problem, which is that the phenomenology stuff seems to be doing no work. Like it seems like you're like kind of dropping like some like fun facts about like phenomenology, that we have like phenomenal experiences, that these phenomenal experiences are directed towards objects. You know, there's like an object of your desire and an object of your love and like an object of your experience. But then it kind of seems to be doing like no work, and then you're just running like the Kalam. So I don't know. It's a bit unclear what the phenomenology stuff is doing, but okay. Here's a question for you. Do you think that God's act of creation begins to exist, or do you think that God's act of creation is eternal?
God's act of creation is in like the mechanics by which he creates the material reality.
when God exercises his creative powers, which then creates the universe, was he doing this eternally, or does he begin to do this at some point?
I would say he does it eternally.
Okay, well then the universe just is eternal, so there kind of isn't like a first cause.
Why would you posit that that makes the universe eternal?
Because God's exercising his causal power necessitates the thing comes into existence. So if the thing has come into existence eternally, well, then the universe just is eternal.
Hmm. Okay, concede there.
Sure. What do you want to talk about next?
Let's go back to where you brought in the problem of evil.
Yep.
I think where you started was God wills everything in existence.
That's what the guest brought up. I think that the theist
Okay.
probably wants to reject that. I for sure wouldn't hold that God is, well, although you might have to. I mean, in some sense, if you think that God creates the timeline, God's all knowing when he creates like the first event, he knows exactly the timeline that he's creating, and then he creates this timeline intending to create this timeline. Well, it kind of seems like God must intend for all of the events to happen. So maybe actually the theist is committed to this.
I wouldn't say that the theist would have to be committed to that, just because he can God simultaneously know where something is going, but not necessarily intend that it goes there,
Um,
or um, be willing to allow it to go somewhere that he doesn't initially intend for a greater good.
yeah. So this harkens back to something that all of my book club attenders will be knowledgeable of, which is like the doctrine of double effect, that things can have unintended consequences. That, if you take an action and you know that a bad outcome is going to happen from that, but you didn't intend for that bad outcome to happen, that's better than like intending for the bad outcome to happen from the action. So in that sense, it sounds like what you're saying is that God created the timeline knowing exactly what was going to happen, but he didn't intend for, his intention was not that these things would actually come about. I think that this is probably a problem because even if God isn't intending it, he's certainly still responsible for it. God knew that if he created that these things would come about, he created this exact timeline knowing exactly what would happen. He must just be responsible for all those things.
Yeah, I would agree that he would be responsible
Like like
for
morally
those things.
responsible. Like for example, let's say you knew that if you were to impregnate your wife right now, that baby would grow up to be like Adolf Hitler. You knew that with absolute certainty, and then you you take the action and give birth to like Hitler. I don't know if you did that knowingly. I think you probably have moral responsibility for that.
You could certainly argue that to a degree. That's a strong argument. But how would you factor that against the that that baby was like potentially not Hitler?
So, I mean, if you don't know what's going to happen, then obviously I don't think that you're morally responsible there. I think that that's like the difference between, I don't think like Adolf Hitler's parents are morally responsible for their son's actions, barring them like causing them knowingly or something like that. But I mean, if God's all knowing and he takes the action that creates the timeline that includes something like the rape of Nanking, then I'd say that God's morally responsible for that. He knew what was going to happen if he creates this timeline. He created the timeline. He could have created the timeline where that doesn't happen. Then God's responsible.
Yeah, I would agree that God's responsible for that, ultimately. But like say God creates a universe like knowing that the rape of Nanking happens, but the universe, this self same universe, um, it's like it potentially wouldn't happen. Like he creates into the universe
Then
something that he knows is going to happen, but like it's not like he created it where it necessarily has to happen. Like it necessarily it couldn't. It's like the fact that that happened is contingent upon other people's wills being injected into his universe.
this seems to be a direct contradiction. If God knows something's going to happen, it's not possible that it doesn't happen.
Hmm. Um,
It seems like if God knows that the rape of, so God's choosing which timeline, or so sorry, God's like deliberating about which timeline to choose. He chooses the timeline that includes the rape of Nanking, knowing that it's going to happen. It's not possible that after God exercises his creative power to create this exact universe where he knows what's going to happen in the future, that that thing doesn't happen in the future. If God creates the timeline knowing what's going to happen, necessarily that thing is going to happen.
okay, I'll grant you that. I'll grant you that. So in this scenario, God is responsible for the rape of Nanking. Like what degree of responsibility would you then attribute if God is not like directly acting out the rape of Nanking?
The same degree of responsibility that I would have if somebody, knowingly conceived baby Hitler and then, baby Hitler goes on to do the Holocaust. I think that I think that there would be like shared moral responsibility. This bad thing happened. He could have had it not happen. He could have made a timeline where it doesn't happen. So he's responsible, probably to a similar extent to the perpetrators.
Okay, and given that we're like deciding that God is like ontologically different than people, when we assign responsibility, like what I'm like play this out a little bit more. Like
Mhm.
God is responsible for the rape of Nanking. Like
Yeah.
what then?
Well, okay. It just seems like God would be blameworthy. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like an all good being could be responsible for a thing like that. Like there would need to be some sort of exonerating circumstance. But then that seems like it would commit you to saying that, the rape of Nanking is for the greater good, which is disgusting.
Yeah, I agree. When you say exonerating circumstance, would you expound on that?
Yeah. So sometimes people are okay. Let's do like the parent-child analogy because I think it's really good in terms of thinking about the problem of evil. Um, when let's say you're like a parent and you're allowing your child to fall off the bike over and over and over again because you know that this process is necessary in order for them to, not fall off the bike. In order to learn how to ride the bike, they just kind of have to do this. There's no other way. So maybe maybe the rape of Nanking is the only way to achieve some greater good. And that's why God created this timeline, that the timeline would actually be worse if it didn't happen. But, I think we just have really good reason to think that the world would have been a better place had it not happened. So it just seems like there's like this tension here where you end up having to say something like the world is a better place, the timeline is a better timeline because this happened, all things considered.
Okay, yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. In the analogy of the parent analogy, like letting your kid fall off the bike, I think we can demonstrate just from like the general psychological literature that like parents have to accept some degree of like risk of death in raising children so that they don't develop neurosis growing up. Like if you were to perfectly preserve your child from
Mhm.
circumstances that could hurt them,
Yep.
they would not be able to grow into a functioning adult. So like, yeah, it's complicated and difficult, but like you have to create the circumstances where like the child can experience harm, even knowing that like that could result in the child's death. Like you have to accept that risk. So like say God creates a world, um, basically knowing that human beings could seize a moral agency outside of his grace, as is loosely described in the fall narrative in Genesis. And he just can't create willing beings if there isn't the opportunity for them to do something absolutely horrible.
Yeah. The problem is that what this ends up committing you to is that, okay, specifically when God creates the timeline, he knows exactly what's going to happen. He knows exactly how the free will is going to end up getting used. There is no mystery to God about how things are going to unfold. So, in that sense, God just becomes responsible for selecting the best timeline that he can, a timeline where if you changed anything at all, it would become a worse timeline. But then that seems to indicate that every bad thing that's ever happened, the world would have been a worse place, not a better one, had it not happened. Like, for example, it seems to commit you to saying, because we must live in the good timeline, like the best possible timeline, and all the other timelines are strictly worse, you seem to be committed to saying that the world would have been a worse place had the rape of Nanking not happened.
Yeah, I agree with your logic there. That's a great point. Kind of to tie more into like when I read, um, say God knowingly creates the world, and he wants the best possible timeline, even if it includes horrors. And I agree that yeah, there some the rape of Nanking or some other heinous atrocity um, happens in this world. Like he knows it's going to happen. He creates the world. It happens. But in creating the world, he provides like every possible chance for that not to happen.
Mhm.
So he knows it's going to happen, but he actively sustains like every possible um, instance for this like not to occur. Um, but he has to allow for the possibility of heinous atrocities to happen if he wants willing agents that interact with him via, a consensual interaction.
Yeah.
So, like, it's like for example, the Genesis narrative is often read by in the rabbinical tradition to describe a situation where um, humanity like departs from the immediate presence of God's grace and the sustenance from atrocity that would entail for greater optionality. And in doing so, like incurs the natural consequences of like being a conscious mind living in a material existence, right? So if God gives the chance for that not to happen, even if he knows it does happen, um, like I don't I don't see a way in which that would categorize God as evil. Though like the nature of describing God as like perfectly good is certainly questionable by your logic.
Yeah. So, okay, maybe what we could do to get like linear with this, because it sounds like you're agreeing with the logic, but then at some point you're like disagreeing with it. So maybe here's like a way to formalize it. So God creates the best possible timeline. If this is the best possible timeline, then any change would make it worse. The timeline without the rape of Nanking is a change in the timeline. Therefore, a timeline without the rape of Nanking is a worse timeline than the one with it.
Okay.
I guess my point is that this seems to like assassinate like our ordinary moral intuitions, which maybe you want to do for other reasons, but it just seems like it seems like I probably just don't know anything about goodness if the world would be a better place with the rape of Nanking as opposed to without it.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. I mean, I would be able to accept that it like does destroy moral intuition, um, given that we can like observe how moral genealogies work across cultures and time. Uh, like I find the like human ability to access like a proposed objective morality to be tenuous.
Mhm. Sure.
Um,
But is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about there. You've made some very interesting points. Um, I guess like why do human beings have to necessarily have an objective moral intuition? Like what is contingent upon that in like um evaluating the problem of evil?
Well, what we end up with is that we just don't really have moral knowledge at that point. That I think the world would be a better place had the rape of Nanking not happened, or like every instance of rape, or even just like an individual instance of rape. Like I think the world would have been a better place if that sort of thing hadn't happened simply because everyone had the free will to do it, but just nobody chose it. Um, that to me seems like a much better world. However, it it seems to we seem to be committed to saying that the world actually somehow is a worse place, or sorry, the world is a better place with things like rape as opposed to the timeline without rape.
No, I wouldn't say that it would be better with any particular crime than without it. I
You
guess
have
I
to
just
if
don't
it's the
fall.
best timeline. If it's the best timeline, then any change to it makes it worse. So if you were to change the timeline by taking out like one specific rape, then the timeline is worse now.
Okay, yeah, so that's probably where we're gonna run into our specific disagreement. It's like I don't think it's the best timeline. And
Oh, then God's not all good because he didn't create the most good timeline. Would be the problem there.
okay, yeah, so that's where our disagreement is gonna be. Yeah, I don't think that like God has to create the best timeline to be all good, because to create the best timeline, he would eradicate moral agency in his creatures.
I don't think that follows. God could just create a timeline where people do have moral agency and they just choose to not do things like rape.
Mm, uh, yeah, I would disagree there. Um,
Why? It's a possible timeline. God can create any possible timeline, so God could have created that timeline.
sure.
Also, I
He,
mean,
he, you're positing that he could create creatures that would have like no um
they do have free will, to be clear. That's like stipulated.
yeah, but I mean, would you at least admit that like such creatures would have like zero homology with us?
Zero what?
Homology
Hom-
with us, with like
homology?
homology, ho homology.
Oh, like they're like different?
Yeah, like they would have to like literally be like ontologically like they would share no homology with us.
No, you could have literally the exact same creatures, but then you just look into the timelines. You say, okay, if I create this world, it's going to be associated with this timeline. If I create that world, it's going to be associated with that timeline. And then you just like scroll through the timelines and find the best one, and then you create the best timeline. You know, and that could be presumably, I think that if you think God's all good, then he did the most good thing, which would have to be creating the most good timeline. So it just seems like there would have been a better timeline if God chose the timeline where people do the fewest evil actions.
Yeah, okay, yeah, agree with your first points there, and then again, yeah, disagree with the second point. Where I was going with the homology thing is like let's take murder, for example. Like to create a conscious being that like couldn't possibly murder because it like would never be in their nature to gain
No,
any
that's
advantage.
not what I said. They do have free will. You know, God creates beings that do have free will, but he just selected the timeline that with his foreknowledge he foresaw they never use the free will to rape.
How would that how would that be possible though? Like, um,
Don't you think there's a possible world where everybody just freely chooses not to do that?
but I mean, like, let's look at, like genetics and like what instinctual drives towards like survival and reproduction exist. Um, like you're gonna create a world where people are still like homologous to humans, and so they have the drive to certain behaviors that, if executed in a specific context, then become horrible in the experience of a conscious mind or a conscious soul. Uh,
Well, so could I just
like
get
how are they going to
clear?
have free will? How are they going to have free will without um, like the possibility like of misusing these like the fact that we even consider um something like rape to be bad is because we have a drive to participate in like the physical behavior that is rape if it's in a certain context, which is like non-consensually. So if human beings are like have if they exist and they have free will, like how would God create the world in which they're still human beings with a sex drive, but they never rape?
You don't think it's possible for, you know, people to have like the ability to do something and then they just never do it?
Uh, yeah, no, that's possible, but again, like if you have billions and billions and billions of humans, like statistically, like how likely is it that it's never misused? Like in an innate and instinctual drive is
Let me formalize this. So there's a possible world where everyone has the free will to rape and nobody chooses to. God can create any possible world. Therefore, God can create a world where everyone has free will and nobody chooses to.
can I ask you for a favor real quick?
Yeah, what's up?
Could you just rewrite this and use murder as an example?
That's
I
fine.
have like people in my personal life that have been raped, and I don't want them to
That's
like see
fine.
this and think I'm having a flippant
Y-
philosophical
Oh
conversation
no.
about that.
Oh no, I hope you're not about to bite the bullet. Okay. Yep, go for it.
Okay.
Yep, there's a possible world where everyone has the free will to murder and nobody chooses to. God can create any possible world, therefore God can create a world where everyone has the free will to murder and nobody chooses to.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think this is like logically possible and consistent, but
Mhm.
how do you apply that given that human beings like are what we are? You
Okay.
know, like I think to create a possible world where everyone has the free will to murder and nobody chooses to, like human beings would like have to be like not what we are.
The world where people have the free will to murder and do is better than the world where people the free will to murder and don't murder. Okay, wait, sorry, this is like invalid, but I could fix that. Maybe, okay. People murder in this world. I don't know, something like that. It's not strictly valid, but it's like, I don't know. I think the logic underlying it is true. Is there like a
Yeah, yeah.
like a portion where you get off the bus in this argument? Oh wait, sorry. Let me. Yeah. So you think God created the best possible world, which obviously includes people have the free will to murder, and they do. God could have created the world where they have the free will to murder and don't. So it just seems like you'd be left saying that the world where people have the free will to murder and do is better than the world where people have the free will to murder and don't.
Mm, good points here. Yep. Great points.
That's fine. You don't. I'm not going to make you like bite the bullet. But is there something else you wanted to talk about?
For now, no. To avoid wasting your time.
That's okay. You're not
I
wasting
do.
my time.
Oh, I think I would, right? Because I can feel like kind of the pieces of where I disagree, but I couldn't really put them together right now without thinking about it for a while first.
Sure.
So
Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on up. Is there anything else? Or oh yeah, that's right. All right. Thanks so much for coming on up. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, man. Thank you for your time.
Yep. All right. Bye bye. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all the good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. And with that, we will go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Yep.
Thank you
How
for
old are
having me
you?
up.
Yep.
I'm
Absolutely.
above the age of 18.
And what religion?
I like to call myself not a Christian in that I like to identify with the time before there was Christianity.
Jewish?
The time when Jesus was alive and then killed, and then people didn't have the term Christianity.
Okay. Sounds like Jewish, but sure. What makes you think that God exists?
What makes me think God exists? So I'm developing my argument from the idea that God is truth,
Hmm.
and I follow the God of truth.
Okay, this seems to be an issue. So you probably want to say that truth is grounded in being, that the way things are is the grounds for what is true about being, that all of these different truths just end up kind of like supervening onto existence as it is. So that's a problem for this view, because you'd have to say that God is a dependent being. God's not fundamental.
I would have to have you repeat and explain a bunch of what you just said.
Okay,
if
I'll
I'm
give you
gonna
a different
catch up.
argument then. This seems to be like straightforwardly a category error. When you say truth, what do you mean?
What I like to observe is my desire and other people's desire to find truth. And in that, I enjoy being.
Okay. Sure. So, well, I mean, that seems circular as like a definition of truth. Like, is there like a model of truth that you hold to?
Is there a model of truth that I hold to?
Like, this is like an entire philosophical like landscape philosophy of truth. Like, some people think that what it means to say something is true is just that you're saying that it is. Maybe you're saying, you know, truth is that which like corresponds to reality. But then if truth is what corresponds to reality, then truth depends on reality.
Truth depends on reality. Yes.
Then God would be a dependent being.
He limits himself?
No, like,
Is that what dependent being
no,
means?
no, no. Well, what it means is that in order for God to exist, there's something else that must exist to give God his being, right? So if you take truth to be something like that which corresponds to reality, in order to have truth, you need to have reality. So God wouldn't be the alpha and the omega. He would be like the beta and the gamma, right? He's like he's a couple links down the chain of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes like any sense at all.
Are you familiar with the symbol for the set of nothing? It's a zero with a strike through it.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of a black hole, the way a black hole looks.
Okay.
I looked up today, the symbol was formalized before computational models of a black hole, and I find that coincidental and wonder-inducing.
That's cool. I mean, it's not a very complex symbol. You know, it's just like a circle with a line through it. Also, are black holes really circles with lines through them? I don't know if that's like the most accurate description of a black hole. Also,
To a
black
simple
holes
mind
aren't,
like me, I think it's a good
black holes aren't
analogy.
nothing as well. So,
I also find that a human's ability to attempt to observe nothingness as a symbol is paradoxical and wondrous as well.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's interesting. You know, we have like a symbol that's meant to designate like nothing, but I don't know. I feel like we're off the rails a little bit. Is there something you want to talk about?
Well, if you would grant me that we're jousting a little bit, you kind of tossed me off, and I have maybe thrown you off a bit.
I mean, if you're asking me to like call it a draw, I think it's up for the audience to decide that. But is there something that you wanted to talk about God?
Yeah, I find your ability to examine truth interesting and compelling.
Thanks.
Oh,
That's nice.
and so I'd like to continue doing that if you would also.
Yeah. But do you have like evidence to think that God exists?
Okay. Do I have evidence to think that God exists? Well, in listening to your conversation with the last guest, one of the questions that came up to me was, why do you get to make all these arguments from the position that God is real when you yourself hold to the position that God is not real?
Yeah, that's a feature of logic. So, in logic, there is different methods of proving something. There's lots of different like structures and ways that you could go about demonstrating that a proposition is true or false. So, one of these ways is called a proof by contradiction. What you do is you say, if this thing were true, then here's what would follow. And because what would follow isn't true, well, the initial thing can't be true either. So let's say I'm trying to prove by contradiction that it rained. You know, if it rained, then the ground is wet, but the ground is not wet. Therefore, it couldn't have rained, because if it did rain, then we would have a different circumstance than what we have right now. So that's how I'm able
Okay.
to argue from the position that God does exist to demonstrate his non-existence, is because I'm saying if God did exist and, you know, Christianity was true, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then here's what would follow. Now, what follows is false. Therefore, Christianity must be false, or God's existence must not be real.
Okay. And so the rape of Nanking is agreeably a bad thing.
Yeah, that is like the falsity that I'm demonstrating, is that it seems like the theist is committed to saying not that it's like intrinsically good, but just that it's better. It's a thing that is better to have happened as opposed to have not happened.
Are you familiar with the argument that God limits himself for the sake of relationship with people?
That's more like a proposition than an argument. I'm not too sure. Like, is there like an argument in favor of that?
Well, so the Trinitarian viewpoint is that there's a God who is one and three simultaneously.
Yeah, I got that. Like, I'm familiar with like the Bible lore, but is there a reason to think that any of it is true as opposed to just, you know, like kind of insisting?
Is there any? Okay, well, maybe we assume that I'm making an argument from falsehood. What
Well,
was the term?
so that's what you've laid out is a conclusion. You need to give like a reason to believe the conclusion, like
A reason
evidence.
to believe that God is a Trinity.
Yeah, or like reasons to believe that the Bible is true, something like that.
Okay.
Maybe I could give you something that I have. It seems like if you have a trinity of gods, that would just be three gods. You know, let's say I'm trying to count how many pens I have. Well, you know, I have these three objects. They have different parts, but what they have, you know, this pen or this object has the essential features of a pen. This object, distinct from the first one, has the essential features of a pen. This object, distinct from the other two, has the essential features of a pen. It just seems like we would have three pens. We have three things that instantiate the pen essence. We have three pens. So if we have three beings, each distinct from each other, each individually instantiating the God essence, well, it just seems like we would have three gods.
But we don't. From the Bible lore, from the Bible mythology, we have an indescribable, infinitely vast God, which is analogous to when you look up at the sky and you see that there's more stars than you can count at night. And then we have a man God, and then we have a spirit God, which is something that people can describe sometimes. So we don't have three pens, we have three different things.
Yeah, but each one instantiates the God essence. That's how you determine how many objects there are, is you count, well, you know, Jesus is God. That's one object that instantiates the pen or like the God essence. So that's a God. We have the Father. who instantiates the God essence. So, and he's not Jesus. He's distinct from Jesus. So that would be a God. And then we have the Holy Spirit who instantiates the God essence, who's separate from the other two. So then that would be a God. We're just left with three gods.
Okay, so the pen analogy also doesn't hold because we're talking about a created being creating a thing, and then we're saying that the pen is like the creator.
No, we're just saying this is how we count objects. Like when we're determining how many of an object there are, this is how we do it. We determine how many things there are that are distinct from each other that instantiate an essence. 3 things with the pen essence is 3 pens. 3 things with the God essence is 3 gods.
So I've been told to research Neoplatonism. Is the essence of a thing a Platonic concept?
I think it appears in Plato. I think most people more associate it with Aristotle, but yeah.
So the reason I bring up to limit the limitation idea is that all the people who were responsible for inflicting the rape of Nanking onto the Chinese people are they're beings that are responsible for their actions.
Mm-hmm. But my point is that God chose the timeline where this would happen. God could have made a timeline where this doesn't happen, where everyone has free will and they just like freely choose not to do this. So God could have created that timeline, but instead God created the timeline that included the rape of Nanking.
Yeah, and that's a really good argument. It's difficult to wrap my mind around why that is something that should be refuted or disagreed with.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah, sure. You got anything else?
He could have, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on up. Appreciate you. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen. I just said that. All right, let's go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it going?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. How old are you?
I'm 20.
And what religion?
I don't go by religion. I go by my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I had a supernatural encounter 7 months ago, but I would personally say Christianity because that's what everyone calls it. But before that, my grandma raised me in the church when I was, young and growing up. I didn't believe her at all. Like, that's your belief, that's your comfort. And then 7 months ago, I had an encounter with him, and he proved that he was real. He came to me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure. But do you have like some sort of evidence that I could actually engage with?
Well, from my experience, I would pray, ask who the highest power is, and do it with like childlike faith, and he will reveal himself in spirit. Because there's a spiritual realm,
I don't know, actually.
You don't know about the spiritual realm?
Yeah, I don't have good evidence for spiritual realm.
Me neither. Like, and I also had an IQ of 64 before my encounter. I was mentally retarded. I mean,
don't say that.
No way my brain could make itself smarter. Sorry, apology.
Yeah, you can't say words like that.
Yeah, I was depressed. I was misunderstood. My fault. Sorry. I was slow. Most of my life, misunderstood, depressed, suicidal. I had a lot of childhood trauma. And there was just a knowing that hit me. I was walking on the side of the road.
Wait, sorry. Because you did say something that presumably you'd have evidence for. Do you have like some sort of like medical documentation or like some sort of like result of the IQ test saying that you have 64 IQ points?
Yes. It's
Please, I would actually take that as like pretty good evidence if you have like something documented that states that you had this many IQ points, and then you have something subsequent that demonstrates that you have like way higher IQ points.
Yeah, and that would make you believe, right? I mean, because there's no way somebody can go their whole life with being, having that low of an IQ, and then all of a sudden having all of this knowledge. I mean, right? No way.
Yeah, could you wait? Can we get the
encounter with God?
wait? Can we get the wait? Can we just get the evidence? Like that's what I'm interested in next. That's the next thing that I want from you is the evidence.
If in my gallery, I'd have to go back and get it.
Okay.
I can send it to you personally,
Oh, you're cracking up pretty bad.
and whatnot, but I can't pull it up immediately here.
You're okay. Wait, your connection's quite bad. Here's what I'll tell you. If you can, although I think I'd probably give it less weight at this point, but yeah, I mean, no. If you come back with like good documentation saying that you had like 64 IQ points, which okay, listen, I think that I don't know. I mean, if you're somebody who's been like victimized by like the Arsler, then if you're using that word to describe yourself, it's unclear to me how that wouldn't just be like an instance of reclamation. Although, like for sure, if that dude's just like telling a story, then that's ableist. But I don't know. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, doing all that good stuff. Joe White, thanks so much for the super chat. How do you deal with the notion that value or quality is a function of composition? I'm not sure why it would be. I don't know. You should send not to say like you should send me more money or whatever, but like Joe White, I don't really know what your question's asking. If you want to elaborate on it, I'd be happy to evaluate. Otherwise, Grimlock, thanks so much for the super chat. Hydration donation, 'tis hot as fuck. Okay, I'll hydrate. All right, with that, we'll go to. Whoa, is that the goat? Hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? How you
Yeah,
doing?
what do you want to talk about?
I was curious if I wanted to run an argument for atheism by you,
Yeah, go for
because
it.
yeah, so humor has this interesting idea where it comes from the concept of like, how there's like theoretical infinities and then like actual infinities, and like actual infinities are impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, so the argument's something like this, where if we take classical theists and the sort of notion of like triomny properties and then say all powerful, as well as like all knowing, and then we look at what it means to be all knowing, and then what it means to be all knowing is to have something where it's like you know every true proposition or something
Yeah.
like that. Okay, or like every proposition or something like that.
Mhm.
Then this causes like an actual infinity because of a sort of regress problem where it's like X, you know that you know X, you know that you know that you know X,
Sure.
and then you now have an actual infinity, which is the set of all elements of knowledge. And I was curious, and there's like a similar thing with like all powerfulness, where
Mhm.
that's like an actual infinity, and they try and argue that this makes it like impossible, like just on the prior for classical theists to exist. I'm curious what your thoughts on this are, because
So, I know one response to this is I think that classical theism probably is a way out of this, where you just deny that, but then like classical theism is like obviously false for like a ton of other reasons. Like this is something that William Lane Craig says sometimes, is that he holds the view that God's knowledge is not composite but is rather simple, and because he's not a nominalist, that means that because he is a nominalist, he's not a Platonist. He doesn't think that there are like propositions that actually exist out there. So in that sense, he thinks that all of the propositions that we could describe God knowing. These are just like abstractions. They're like conceptual. So I think that probably gets around it. But that view is like unintelligible to me. I have no idea what it means to say that God's knowledge is simple.
Yeah, that I mean, okay, at least personally, I agree that like GTV plus is probably true. So maybe if you get them to sign off on that, where it's like to know a proposition is just to mean that you have some belief regarding that proposition. That I mean, that's just how I understand. I don't understand
Mhm.
how like what does it even mean to say that knowledge is simple? That sounds kind of weird to me.
Have you looked into like divine simplicity stuff at all?
That genuinely does not make sense.
I
It's like, what do
agree.
you mean that God is just his properties? He's not like something
Well,
which
wait,
like
not even that. He's just his substance. They want to say God doesn't have properties.
it's like I
Otherwise,
thought he's identical to his properties. It's like 50
you
different ways I've heard this cashed out.
you want to say, well, there are 50 different ways to cash it out, but what they want to say is that God doesn't have properties. Otherwise, that would mean that God is identical to a property, which they definitely don't want to say.
Yeah.
But what they might want to say, I think like the most plausible reading that isn't just like, well, even this is like obvious gibberish, but it's like less obvious gibberish. I think you want to say that God is identical to his substance, and then when you say God is love or God is good, you're speaking like analogically. But I think that's unintelligible. I don't know. I an analogy needs to have like a shared conceptual core, and it just kind of seems like there isn't one.
Yeah. The only understanding of God that I make sense of is the immaterial mind stuff.
Yeah,
Like I think saying like God is an immaterial mind with XYZ proper like with the property of he has all propositional knowledge or something like that.
yeah.
That makes sense to me. But then I mean, I guess the cash out is well, it's not supposed to make sense to you because you're just like some idiot human. But
Yeah.
uh,
It's like the top tier weaseling. But um, I, I think that analogical predication. This is like several twists and turns like down the dialectic, but I think that analogical predication comes at a price. Well, so first, depending on how strongly they take simplicity, they must say that everything you say about God is an analogy, that it's not literally true. But then all of your like, first of all, it doesn't even seem like there could be like Bayesian evidence for this thing who's like totally indescribable. It just seems like you couldn't possibly make a prediction about this thing if you can't even describe like what it is. And then also like obviously the deductive arguments are going to fail too because you can't possibly deduce the existence of this thing that's indescribable. So it just seems like I don't know. It's divine simplicity is bad, but uh, in order to avoid the argument that you're describing in terms of his knowledge, Craig holds that God's knowledge is simple, that it doesn't have parts like metaphysical or physical or like logical, but then that just seems false. Like different pieces of knowledge are different pieces of knowledge.
I mean, I would understand if it's like okay, they're obviously not like physical entities. Like
Yeah.
yeah, sure, that's fine, but it certainly seems that, for example, like you and I have finite minds, so
Mhm.
there could be like a set K, and the set K is just every single proposition that we know, and this would be a finite set. And then when you look at God, well, it would be an infinite set where every single member of the set is just like an actual it's a belief that
Yeah.
God has that well it has two features like it's true whatever
Yeah.
um so there is that and then I mean I can't really tell if this like I mean I'm not too well versed in like the mathematics and stuff. I can't tell if this is like another rock argument or if this is like just genius.
Sure. What is it?
Like no the one that I gave you because
Oh, yeah.
yeah humor like talked about this on the latest like podcast episode. And he doesn't. I'm not a big fan of his stuff on theism, but I thought this was kind of interesting. But maybe it's just another rock paradox.
I think the
Not too sure.
one, I mean, gosh, as like an atheist, the one that I'd be inclined to reject, and the one that I think probably the theist wants to reject too, I think you want to say that actual infinities are fine.
Uh, feels kind of wonky, no? Or I thought this was just something that people agree with.
No, I think it's contested.
Okay.
There are like a lot of positions that would reject that. In fact, I have no idea how Humer could hold to that because he believes in actual infinities. He's a Platonist. He thinks that there really are like mathematical entities. So presumably you want to say that there's like infinite numbers.
I think he has like a response to this because in the interview he says, I don't think that like okay, basically he just asserts that actual infinities don't exist. So maybe he has a response or he hasn't super thought about this. But
That's
yeah,
that's right. I remember that. I watched a bit of the interview. Maybe he wants to say like actual like concreta.
but would knowledge be like a concrete item? Is the point?
Proust and Rasmussen define concrete as things that where it's possible to cause other things. So maybe your knowledge is
I mean,
causal.
yeah. Knowledge obviously has causal powers, right? Because
Yeah,
like you can reflect on like a token of knowledge and then act in a different way. Um,
sure.
so I think you probably want to say that because it's like I could just like import 10 pieces of knowledge onto you,
Mhm.
and that would cause you to act in a different way. Maybe that's one way of going about it.
Yeah,
So that was the first argument, and then the second point was regarding a potential. So there's a lot of like attempted refutations or like complete refutations of the problem of evil,
yeah,
and I was curious if you think this is an adequate response to like just any total refutation,
sure.
which
For
is
logical or evidential?
like probably the evidential ones,
Oh, sure. Yeah, go
right?
for it.
Yeah, so it's something like you know how fine tuning has the starting case where it's like there's a case where it's like super apparent to you that you
Yeah,
should update.
yeah. Like
So
you
just
ask some
imagine a similar
evidence.
case. Yeah, just imagine like a similar case where it's just like we discover trillions of planets, and on each one of these planets there's like trillion like, you know, qualitatively identical to humans just like have been tortured for like all of time.
Mm,
That's obviously evidence you should update on. But then if it's like a complete, like if it's like total refutation, then you wouldn't update on that evidence. Now
sure.
I spoke to some people and they just bit the bullet. But what are your thoughts here?
I mean, if we discovered that, I think that I would update. Maybe I'm not tracking, but I'd update strongly in the direction of thinking that God doesn't exist. If I discovered like trillions of hell planets, in the
Okay,
same
okay.
way that I
Do you
think
think that
like
that's
I
like a sufficient bullet?
um for the theist to bite.
Yeah, because when I talked to someone, they were just like, no, I just wouldn't update on that. And at least to me, that seems like absurd. I was like, okay, you should definitely update on that. But
Yeah, I well, that is interesting because I think if I thought that I had like a total like refutation of the problem of evil, and then we discovered like all the hell planets, I think I'd probably reevaluate my refutation of the problem of evil.
yeah, it seems more likely that God just doesn't exist than your reputation is right. Like if you want to think about like sort of like a Morian case, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I yeah, I think so. It seems crazy to me to not update on that. I think even if you do the things to like mitigate the problem of evil, you still have to end up saying something like, you know, it's like some evidence against theism.
Yeah, I think you have to go down a little bit in credence.
Yeah.
Um,
Same thing
but
with
yeah, that
like
was
fine tuning. Like even if you run like the huge like disjunctive responses, it's like maybe you should still update like slightly. You're off the app, Rancho.
yeah, sorry, I was getting a
You're
phone
good.
call.
You're good. You're good.
But yeah, okay. Those were just the two things that I wanted to run by you because not most of the people I talk about philosophy with aren't super big into theism, so I was
Yeah.
kind of curious. But yeah, um, I'll let you know if I hear anything else interesting about the infinities one, because as far as theism and atheism go, like there's like two good arguments for either side, and it gets really boring. So maybe
Mm.
this could be a more interesting one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although, I I have run like the infinity stuff against people who run like the Kalam or yeah, things of that sort.
Do you think that the what is it like the Reaper stuff, any of that works, or are you pretty satisfied with like the light bulb cases?
Um,
We put the light bulbs in a circle.
I think probably the unsatisfiable pair diagnosis is
Okay,
true.
okay.
I haven't
Yeah,
looked too deep
okay.
into it. It's
Have you heard of the light bulb one? Or it's
yeah,
like a
yeah. I've seen
companions
the
argument?
video with like Troy and Joe with that.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't read the paper, but
I
That
haven't read
one
the
seems about
Malpass
right.
paper either. I just watched the video.
Based. Fucking based. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't read it all. I just like LARP.
Yeah, that's what they don't know. They don't know that, Monkey Boy's actually on the other line and he's feeding you answers.
True, true. That's why we never stream at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, sorry, I exposed your secret.
Oh
Okay. You,
no. All right. Hey,
I'm gonna
thanks for
dip.
coming up. Yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
it.
make sure you buy Monkey Boy's new merch line,
Yeah.
guys. Not sponsored.
Monkey Boys merch is the best merch, stands independently, intersubjectively, in all possible worlds, essentially, autonomously. Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
Yeah, what's up? How old are you?
I'm over 18. I don't know if I caught
Yep.
that.
Yeah, what
I
religion?
wanted. Well, I don't think it matters for the argument. So if you're defining God in your argument, whose definitions are you using?
Well, in order for there to be like an argument in the first place, or like a needed argument in the first place, you would need to disagree about the conclusion. So if your definition of God is something that I don't disagree with, then the argument becomes unnecessary. So I think that
Right.
you accept the argument, or you accept the definition of the person giving the argument, but then, if there's like some sort of like disagreement on terms, then
So the argument or the statement is relational to the person's perspective of
are you asking?
interpretation of.
So
Yeah.
yeah, when I say that God isn't real, I'm saying that there isn't like a mind at the foundation of reality. That there isn't like an ultimate mind that's
Is that
responsible
what
for the rest of
religious people
reality.
say?
Yes, explicitly.
Because that would have to categorize everybody in every religion to that perspective of God,
This is the
including people
definition.
that are non-religious.
This is the definition that gets invoked by philosophers of religion, that God is something like a personal ultimate foundation. This is the definition that you'll find from people like Mullins. This is the
Okay.
definition that you'll find from people like Schellenberg. This definition gets
So
used
the
pretty
definition
frequently.
is an abstraction still.
Kind of all definitions are abstractions, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, unless you can build them from relations that make them ontological.
I don't know what the fuck that means.
So like if you were to describe God, you would have to build him from what people thought God was. You can't just claim it and then say everybody falls into that bucket.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that's what I'm saying. When I say God isn't real, that's what I'm saying. So if you think that
Okay.
God is real, and by that you mean that there is a mind at the foundation of reality, then I'd ask you for your argument. So that's probably what I'm going to ask you. Do you think that there's a mind who is ultimate, like an ultimate person?
I would say that that's probably dependent on the person having that perspective.
I'm asking you.
So that's like a local question.
I'm asking you. You are the person
I know
who
I'm saying
asking.
the answer is like, sorry, can you restate the question?
Do you think that there is a mind that everything else in reality depends on for its existence?
Well, yeah, it would be my own mind.
Okay, but that's gibberish.
Well,
You
no,
have-
because if I wasn't here, I wouldn't be able to have that realization.
I agree with that, but there were things that existed before you existed.
Not
you-
to my knowledge.
You don't think that you came from your parents?
Well, that's a causal chain.
Yeah. So your parents don't depend on you. You depend on your parents.
No, well, they wouldn't be my parents if I wasn't around right? The relationship is what builds everything.
Yeah, but I'm speaking of the entities themselves, just those people. You depend on those people.
That's a category error.
Sorry, what category?
which one are you trying to drop in?
You said
Parent
it's a category
A
error.
and child over here. Pardon.
But what's the category that I've
You're trying to-
misdescribed to what?
The relationship category.
The
between
relation.
parent
I'm
and
sorry.
child.
So, do
You
you think
said
that there
one's
isn't like a
dependent on the
relation between
other.
parent and child?
I'm not saying it's causal the way you said. You said
Do you
child to
disagree with
parent,
that?
not. It's a relational. You can't have one without the other.
I agree with that. Yeah.
You said one's dependent.
Yeah. They are your
So how is it
parents because you
dependent?
exist, right? The fact that you are
Yeah, but
actual
they-
means that the relation is actual. This is like
You
basic.
said one depends one way, but not the other.
Correct. That the person, the
that's not
individual, I'm speaking of an ontological dependence, that you depend for your being on them. The fact that they exist and that they birthed you accounts for why you exist. Your existence does not account for why they exist, though.
Right.
They
It
could have
depends
existed
on whose
even without you.
observation you're taking as truth.
Mhm. Do you agree that you depend on your parents?
To have existed, like the chicken
Yeah.
and the egg question, right?
Not even.
Yes.
Just like the fucking like child and the parent, right?
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that in order for them to be a parent, they have to have a child. In order to be a child, you would have had to have a parent.
Yeah, I
they're not
agree with that.
dependent one way. Like everybody's existence couldn't be perceived through.
Could those people have
Everybody-
existed without you?
But if nobody existed, would anybody?
Do you wanna
kinda
answer the
like it follows all the
question?
way down too, right?
Wait,
I'm
could
just
you have
expanding it.
existed if they didn't exist?
Right. So no,
That was-
but expand the scope
So no.
to everybody.
Okay, sure. So could they have existed if you didn't exist?
From like, right, and I'm saying
It's a
from
yes or
your
no
perspective,
question.
yes. From my perspective, no.
Okay, wait. So you do think that from whose perspective is it true that or that your parents could not have existed had you not existed? I'm asking like objectively.
Right. And I'm saying it's kind of like it goes I can't even say the word. It adds up through everybody from the first existence of being able to even observe existence.
Okay. Let's formalize this. So if your parents didn't exist, then you wouldn't exist. If you didn't exist, then the people who are your parents in this world could still have existed. Do you disagree with this?
Yeah, but I think we could make
Okay.
it simpler by just using.
Wait, sorry, which of these two do you disagree with?
I would like to start from like what is real.
Wait, sorry, I just want to know which one you disagree with.
Two.
You think that if you didn't exist, the people that gave birth to you in this world would not have existed in that world?
As my parents.
I agree they wouldn't have been your parents, but the people still would have existed. That's
But your
why I
state-
highlight the people.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying the scope is too small because you still have parents in the statement.
They are in this world. I could put this in parentheses if you'd like. We could say,
But I don't exist in this world. So
yeah,
they
who are your
wouldn't be my
parents in like the current world, like the actual world?
but I don't like in the hypothetical. I
No,
don't
in
actually
this
exist
world, the
here.
world where you do exist, they are your parents, but
Yes,
in the
in
hypothetical
one.
world, they're just people who are not your parents.
Right. Sorry, I wasn't seeing where your mouse was.
Okay. So, do you agree with this now that if you didn't exist, then the people could still have existed? The people who are your parents in the actual world could have existed, just not as your parents?
Right. And what I'm saying is we're
Then you
changing
depend
what's
on them.
real in this causal chain.
So then you agree that you depend on them for your existence?
Right.
Okay. So then you can't be the fundamental thing.
Well, no, I'm not saying that though, right?
You just
I'm
said that
saying
you're the
that-
ultimate mind, that everything else depends on for its existence.
Like what I was saying is if I don't exist, I can't have that interpretation either or.
No, I agree with
And
that.
so all of reality wouldn't exist to me.
Yeah, I
So
agree,
if
because you
everybody
wouldn't
didn't
exist.
exist, would reality still exist?
Yes.
Right? And then and then that goes all the way back into like who's making that claim though?
Nobody needs to make the claim for it to be true. Something can be true even if nobody makes the claim.
But nobody could even distinguish the claim at all.
Yeah, they wouldn't need to. We don't need somebody to distinguish the claim in order for it to be true. Something can be true even if there's nobody that thinks it.
I'm saying that in order for it to be a claim at all, it would have to be realized as such, but nobody exists to make the claim at all.
It could
for
just
it
be
to
some like
even
fact
realized.
of reality.
It could be, but now we're speculating.
Oh, okay, then I'll just make the firm claim that there are facts about reality that people don't know.
Like, we might not know something about God that would make him real.
No, because God entails contradictions.
But not in the scope that I just argued.
But in the view where God is the ultimate mind, that runs into contradictions.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're imposing a definition onto the word now.
Yeah, I'm stipulating to you what I mean when I say God isn't real.
Okay, so I'll concede to your argument that in that definition, he doesn't exist.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming on. All right. Hey, if you want to join the book club, there's still time. We're reading in about an hour from now, we'll be reading Rosalind Hursthouse's On Virtue Ethics. William Kurt, thanks so much for the super chat. I'm interested in joining in to have a discussion, but I don't have access to the TikTok phone app. Do you have Discord or something? We have, what do we have? We have Restream, although I'm going to be ending stream soon, so. But yeah, I don't know. We'll think about it. Joe White, thanks so much for the super chat. Keep getting args from some where they deplore the value of life or the quality of thought coming from the molecules in motion as though the content dictates the worth. An argument from Ick cloaked in the causal argument. You know, you have a brain, your brain has mental states. Why? I literally don't know why it would matter that it just reduces to this. Like, I have no clue why it being molecules in motion means that like the thing that you're experiencing is any less experienced. It's, you know, I don't get it. I don't get what the argument's supposed to be there. Them like throwing a fit, them like pounding on the table and saying you're just molecules in motion. Why does that mean that you can't know anything? Why does it reducing to molecules in motion mean that you can't know things? What does that mean that you don't have beliefs? You know, if they want to see where the brain states are, that's a category error. There are things that exist that can't be seen by external individuals. You know, I want to see in the computer where I want to see your computer added 2 + 2 together. I want to see where the fucking Claude AI generated this like soliloquy. I want to see where. No, it didn't. I want to see where. Show me where in the circuit board it did that. You think that's just circuits? Like, it's silly. It's just so silly. Mr. Peabody the Skeptic, Thanks so much. Appreciate it. I appreciate the cool Corey membership. That's that's like another thing. That's probably like a brutal counter to tag. I mean, clearly something being mechanical does not trade off with it being capable of like logical processing. You know, AI is clearly able to reason. It's clearly able to find like logical errors. Like obviously you can have molecules that undergo like logical processes and then spit out logical results. It's like trivial. All right. Hey, come to the book club. It's going to be in like an hour. I'll see you all later. It was a lot of fun, and I'll see you tomorrow.